Cool.
Live.
Okay.
Live. We're live. Live with pictures with Meghan Murphy. Hello. Welcome. Kia ora. Welcome to Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Hi.
It's good.
Hello.
As we were driving in from the airport, we were talking about having a drink or two. Yeah?
Or 10.
So we have got out the Department of Conversation. This is the fridge of many things. That's what we call it. We've got out the options here for stuff to drink. So we've got my favorite, which is the vodka that when you smell it, it's got infused with banana. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. Oh, I love that. We've got some gin, we've got some whiskey, we've got some Central Otago wine, we've got some beersies. And you want to start with?
Whiskey.
Okay.
Obviously.
Okay.
Meghan Murphy.
Okay, so notice the name. This is a story to it, right? My mum passed away about 14 months ago. Oh. And my name is Pat, and my family call me Patty. So a very, very good friend of mine in Auckland, when we were up there for the funeral and that kind of stuff, bought me a 6-pack of Irish beer. It's just jumped out of my head. Guinness, and this. So this is the first time we're opening it, and I'm more than happy to open it.
That's so nice.
And that's where it's
touched.
come from. Do you want to give me some ice as well? There,
Thank you.
I'll join you.
Yeah, excuse my fingers.
So this was given to me as a, I don't know, a present. Is that the right word?
A gift, yeah, or something.
And it's been sitting in the back of your shot for, I don't know how many, 20 episodes now without being touched. There you go.
I do feel honored. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll let you pour yourself.
Okay, thank you.
You might
To be fair, in the last 20 episodes, I think this is the only late afternoon one where it's felt appropriate to crack it.
I just watched Meghan get a coffee. I wouldn't even hesitate to try and pour you a drink. I'm sure you like to have it a very specific way after what I just witnessed. The triple Americano with too much milk. And
whenever anybody is like, oh, let me get your coffee, I'm like, no, because I just end up feeling like super high maintenance because have such a like weird picky.
Hey, cheers.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Cheers to Mary Brittenden, Nee Mulligan. That's where this has come from. Ooh,
so good.
It's good.
Yeah.
Nice. Jace, you can just knock yourself out, help yourself, whatever you want.
I think because I'm driving the podcast, maybe I shouldn't drink and podcast. I don't know.
You don't want to crash the podcast.
We'll see. Hey, thank you so much for coming to Dunedin. Just pull yourself into that mic a little bit.
Sorry. Yeah. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah. So the story is, it was announced you look a lot less dangerous in real life, just from what I've read on the internet.
I know. I always feel like so surprised when I read things about myself online because I'm like, if you met me in person, you would not say these things about me.
Thought there'd be spikes sticking out of you or something. Maybe you travelled with a weapon at all times.
A tail and yeah.
I noticed you were coming to New Zealand. I like having interesting conversations with interesting people. I approached the lovely people from Stand Up for Women. Is that what it's called, the group? I don't want to get that wrong.
Speak Up for Women.
Speak Up for Women in New Zealand. And basically they went, well, she's got lots of free time between Saturday and Sunday. You can fly down to Dunedin if you want. And you graciously said yes. So here we are.
Yeah, thanks for bringing me over. I mean, I haven't had much time to explore because I've been so busy since I've been over here. So I'm glad to combine work and exploring. Yeah,
well, I mean, you're only in Dunedin for less than 24 hours, but I mean, I guess you've got all tomorrow off and we can figure stuff out. And Jace, what's the 2 things you got to do when you're in Dunedin? What is there?
Well, you're doing the first one, which is drink, because it's a student city, and the students down here literally riot in the streets every year, pretty much, with drinking and alcohol abuse. Alcohol abuse is almost our second motto. I don't know what else you do. Probably, I don't know, that's very touristy, but you got to go up Baldwin Street, which was, until 3 months ago, the steepest street in the world, until it was challenged by some
little shithouse
like place in Wales that has like this dirt goat track thing that's like slightly steeper, and so there's actually so passionate people. There's like a dude who's like an engineer from Dunedin who's literally flying there to remeasure it because he's so angry about it.
Do you know, people hear that and they kind of go, no, that sounds like a stupid touristy thing. Without question, I mean, I've probably taken 10 visitors by to have a look at the street. Without question, every single one of them, when you drive to the street and you drive down the road it's beside, go, whoa. So you don't think like it's a big deal, but when you actually see it, people are like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, if
it doesn't sound like something I want to do to be.
if your car isn't very powerful, like if it's
painful.
a bit of a shitbox, it won't get up the hill. And if you try and do you don't try and do a U-turn because you literally feel like your car's going to roll over.
Yeah. God, that sounds scary.
Yeah.
So,
it's a great Instagram spot though, because you can lean forward and get the person to orientate the horizon on the road, and it looks like you're like leaning like a 30-degree.
So maybe I'll just stick with the first thing that you have to do. And
this thing.
Yeah.
Am I saying it Dunedin?
You can say Dunedin.
Is that what is it?
Dunedin. No, Dunedin's fine.
Dunedin. What is it?
Dunedin. That's it. Yeah.
Dunedin.
That's Dunedin.
Okay.
Depends on
The locals call it Dunners.
Dunners. Yeah.
That's like the name of it. Like that's
Welcome to Dunners.
Dunners.
It doesn't sound right when I say that.
No.
Dunners.
Dunners.
It makes it sound like.
I think you're hitting that R too hard.
Dunners.
Dunners, like with an A at the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, so welcome. You are without question, and even though you may disagree with the reasons why, a controversial figure.
Mm-hmm. I don't really know why, but I mean, I sort of know why, but it just seems weird because I don't feel like I'm controversial, and I don't feel like I say controversial things. So the like controversy around me is like always a bit baffling to me.
Just going to ask you one time. Just pull
sorry.
It's all right. Just get comfy and then pull the mic to you.
Yeah,
okay. I think I'm worried about like hitting my face on it.
You've got very good posture. You're
my sister's a dancer, so I think she always harassed me about my posture all the time.
You're actually up almost higher than me. I think my seat might have crushed. So there you go.
I think that we should also point out that we're wearing matching T-shirts.
Yeah, did you notice that, Jace? Literally turned up to the airport.
That's weird.
And both wearing Rolling Stones tees. And you didn't change it.
You were saying,
good outfit planning.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's. I put a message on our Facebook, the show Facebook page today, and I said, banned from Twitter, which was kind of your world famous point. Banned from Twitter for, amongst other things, saying men aren't women, which some people find to be a completely sane, rational, and normal point, and other people find to be the most transphobic thing you can say. Mm-hmm. They seem to be the two parts of this conversation. Would that be a fair synopsis?
Yeah, I mean, apparently material reality is transphobic nowadays. So to say that a man is male and a female is a woman or whatever is offensive to some people. I'm not exactly sure why, because I don't think it's offensive to have biological sex, but...
When you say you don't know why, have you spent time like trying to jump into the other shoes going, if I was in this boat, I could see why it would be offensive?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've talked to tons of people about this. It's not that I've not talked to the other side. And in fact, I try to talk to the other side all the time and they won't talk to me, right? Like on News Hub, they couldn't get anyone to debate me, and that's common. Like media has tried to get people to debate me. When I was in the UK, they tried to get somebody to debate me, and nobody will do it. We've tried to hold panels, or others have tried to host panels in Vancouver, where they've tried to get, trans activists or trans identified people or whatever academics who support this ideology to, participate in the panel or to participate in a debate, and no one will do it, which is really frustrating because I feel like, I want to have those conversations, and I think it's totally possible to have respectful conversations and to disagree or disrespectful conversations, like however you want to do it. Yeah. I don't understand why we can't just have the conversation. And even, at my events and things like that, generally the protesters, so the people who are really angry with me, the people who say that I'm being hateful or that I'm saying offensive things, they won't come. Like I wish that they would just come. And then there's always a Q&A. There are always like affordable events. Like, the one I did in Toronto is $5 a ticket. It's not, anyone can come basically. And tell me why they're mad and tell me what it is that's offending them or whatever, so that I can respond, or at least, there's some sort of...
What have you heard? Like, surely there, every now and again you get someone who goes, whatever the point or question would be, you kind of go, oh, that's an interesting point. Like, does that ever happen? When can you think of an example where someone with the opposing view to you makes a point that makes you double think?
Well, it doesn't make me double think because I'm right. But I am. I know that I am. It's not like I think that about everything I say. There's things that I've changed my mind about, and hopefully if you're a mature adult and you're interested in learning and you're engaged with the world around you, you will change your mind about things and you'll learn things and you'll whatever. But in this case, I mean, what I'm saying is really quite basic.
Okay, so pause. Give us the elevator lift pitch, the 30 seconds. What is it that you're saying that you are saying today, this is right, what I'm saying is right. We better put out there what it actually is. So
Yeah.
exactly what are you saying?
So I'm saying that biological sex is real. You can't change your biological sex. So if you're male, you can never become female, vice versa. That's not a judgment. I'm not saying you're not allowed. You're not allowed in our club. I'm just saying it's not possible. It's impossible. I mean, you can get cosmetic surgery. So if you're a male, you could get breast implants, or you could go so far as to get the genital surgery. I mean, those surgeries are really kind of awful, I think. So I wish that people wouldn't do it just for their own benefit, because you end up in a position where you can't enjoy sex and things like that. But whatever, it's your prerogative. If you want to do that,
Sure.
that. Fine. I'm not going to stop
Just
you.
pause though. You say it's not like I'm saying you're not now in our club. On some element, isn't it kind of that is what is being, maybe not by you, but is what's being said. In other words, you hear about women-only spaces and stuff. It is kind of saying you can't come into our club for some people on some level.
I mean, I guess if you think of a transition house as like a sorority house, then you could see it in that way, but it's not, right? Like, so it's framed as exclusion.
Right.
When, I mean, really what we're talking about, we're not even talking about that many spaces, right? And the spaces that we're talking about are spaces that, it's not like a party. It's like the change room, the transition house, female prisons. You know what I mean? Like, it's...
For you, is that obviously this is mostly a conversation around transgender women. It doesn't seem to, and I think this is an interesting point that we might come back to later, that you don't have these conversations around transgender men so much, including in the sports thing. But is that your position about, for example, the changing rooms completely, or if someone's gone through a full medical, physical body change, so they've had parts changed and present completely as female, how do you feel about them in the restroom type area, or do you still stand by no?
Well, so, I mean, usually when I'm asked this question, which I am pretty regularly, I respond by saying that it's just not what we're talking about. So when I got involved in this debate, it was because what was happening was that this legislation in Canada, Bill C-16, and in various other countries, similar bills, similar legislation, were being presented and pushed through that said anybody who self-identifies as the opposite sex is literally the opposite. So it has nothing to do with surgery and hormones. So it's like we're not having that conversation. If we were, then maybe we could be talking about, okay, if you've had all the surgery, blah, 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 then we can talk about it, but it's not. And most trans-identified people haven't had the surgery.
So what we're saying is self-identification basically says I am female or I am male because I say I am.
Exactly. So you, or like I could sit here and say I'm a man, and you would have to be like, yes, you're a man. There's nothing that's changed about me. I've just announced it. And that's what these laws say. And that's what this ideology says, right? This ideology isn't talking about surgery and hormones even. I mean, of course, there are people, and, we can get into this later or whatever. They're putting kids on hormones, which is really horrible.
That's after the third drink, I think.
Yeah. Okay. We'll get there. But yeah, I mean... So to me, that's not the issue, because that's not what we're talking about.
So C-16 is what Jordan Peterson has become world famous for, his pushback against compelled speech. That's primarily your starting point as well?
Yeah, so both of us kind of said, we were probably the most well-known. I can't think of anyone else who really was known for saying something around the same time when this bill was presented, although he became far better known than I did because of... sexism?
Do you know what I thought you were going to say?
What?
I thought you were going to say because of Joe Rogan, but maybe.
Well, why haven't I been on Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson hasn't?
Yeah.
I think I'm interesting enough for
Well,
Joe
see,
Rogan,
but this is the interesting, I was going to say intersection. That's probably the wrong word to use with intersectional feminism, but you identify as, you are a feminist. Would you classify yourself as that kind of classic Germaine Greer second wave feminism? Or do you just call yourself a feminist? Or, well, what I'm going to say is, because then that does add another layer to this conversation that Peterson can't be involved with, because there's that element as well, which you as a female and as a feminist are someone who is maybe impacted by some of these rules and laws and changes to society more than someone else who's talking about it a bit more academically.
Yeah, and my analysis is quite different, and I think I kind of have more skin in the game. So Jordan Peterson, he's not claimed to have skin in the game. He's concerned about compelled speech, which I think is important. Like, I agree with what he says around that, and I agree with his concerns. I'm not being dismissive of him. But my primary concern is around women's rights and the impact on women and girls more than anything else. And then, of course, there's all the other stuff, which is that it's nonsense and people are being forced to lie.
Just pause, because what we're going to do is have a conversation where people like yourself, and maybe to a much more minor extent me, are in this bubble that we have these chats all the time. So when you say forced to lie, example, what are you talking about?
So
so others understand who aren't consuming this on a daily basis like some others are.
Yeah. I mean, everyone knows you can't change sex. Everyone knows who's a man or a woman for the most part. You're looking at a man and that man's telling you he's a woman and you have to go along with it and pretend. And I mean, on one hand, it's ridiculous and you can make jokes about it. And on the other hand, I think it's quite dangerous because I think it's sort of, I mean, girls and women are already socialized to kind of not trust their gut and try to not hurt people's feelings and try to be polite. And abuse happens because of that sometimes. And that's not the only reason that abuse happens, but it happens because, women and girls are sort of taught not to have boundaries and that having boundaries is mean. And so I feel like this plays into all that. So a man is going to be there and be like, no, I'm allowed to be in this change room. You can't say no. Like you feel uncomfortable. I'm a woman. You have to accept it.
The flip side of that is also, and I am being not careful to choose my words, but I'm not in the world. I guess I am. I have the privilege of sort of being a part of the patriarchy, so to speak, and having the privilege of being a man, a white man as well. But the understanding that if you're a part of that protected group, which was controlling the world, for want of a better word, for so long, and you then transition to being part of a different protected group and bring the same opinions and attitudes across that you used to have, you're like, well, my group runs the world, so I'm going to run this world as well. And
that seems like exactly what's happening, right? Like it's like men are literally dominating the feminist movement. At the Women's March, there's men speaking and dictating to women what they should think and what their movement should be about and dissing actual feminists. In Vancouver at the Women's March in, I think it was 2018, this man who identifies as what is he? Like a dominatrix. Right. And also as
he identifies it as a gender.
He identifies as transsexual. So I think he sort of claims, I don't know, it seems to change a lot, but he identifies as a woman or a trans woman or transsexual or whatever, and also dominatrix. And he's at the Women's March promoting prostitution as empowering for women and saying that, feminists who are opposed to prostitution and feminists who are questioning gender identity, ideology, and all this stuff are evil. Like he's talking shit about us and he's talking shit about women who built this movement and fought for all these things that, younger women enjoy today and apparently totally take for granted, like talking shit about women who built transition houses for women, who've spent their lives fighting male violence against women and helping the most marginalized women in the world and helping women who've been, beat up and suffered the most horrible abuse. And this dude, this white man, shows up and starts like, all you, no, this is what you should be doing. This is what feminism is about. Like, it's like, talk about male entitlement. You know what I mean?
So let me just clarify something with you as to the language that you're using. Do you, if someone is transgender female, do you refer to them as a transgender woman?
No.
So you call them a man?
So sometimes I'll say trans-identified male just to specify that they're identifying as trans. Every once in a while I'll say trans woman. Like it depends on the context and sort of what's easier and how fast I have to talk. Like if it's in a short interview and it's like you can't explain all of your vocabulary, then sometimes I'll say trans woman. But yeah, male, man, like I'm not into this pronoun thing. I don't think that it's necessary. I don't understand why it would ever be important for me to refer to a man as her. I'm not trying to be mean and I'm not trying to be antagonistic. Like I swear I'm not just trying to be a dick. Like it's just, I'm not going to play into it because I think it's a slippery slope.
So there seems to be a couple of conversations that go on here. One is that sort of C16 compelled speech with threat of legal action against you. The other is the trans community want to be identified as they want to be identified as. I guess I'm so kind of I'm getting input from here and input from. I've been told by people that I shouldn't be talking to you today. I've been told by people that all the work I've done as an ally in the LGBT community, I'm throwing it all away. Having you in this conversation today, that sort of thing. And I'm getting pulled backwards and forwards. From my perspective, if someone wants to identify as a trans woman, call themselves a trans woman, I don't have a problem with calling her a woman, she, her, a woman. That seems to be, to me, you can educate me, different from then, a person who still carries a penis and testicles wanting to be waxed in Canada, like JY, if we can say her real name or not.
Yeah, you can now. The publication ban's
there
gone.
seems
so
to be levels
yeah.
of it. And I reckon if someone wants to change their name or whatever by default, I don't have a problem with that at all. But I guess what you're saying is you identify this as a bigger issue than just that.
Yeah. So, I mean, what you do in your personal life is not really of my concern, so long as you're not harming other people, right? So if somebody in their personal life, if somebody wants to change their name, if somebody wants to dress however you want, like do what you want, do what makes you feel happy and good. Like I totally support that, but it's the imposing it on other people. And it's, you know, it might seem polite to refer to a trans person, a man who identifies as a woman or wants to be seen as a woman, as she. But to me, it's sort of like this never-ending slippery slope of what next. And it gets really confusing, and it's serious too. Again, like on one hand, it makes no sense and it's unnecessary and silly. But on the other hand, you know, the media is now reporting on crime. So they're reporting on, you know, male violence against women. And they're saying, you know, like a woman beat up this woman, or like a woman raped this woman. And you sort of read through and you get to the end and you're like, and they'll mention trans. They won't even say that it's male. But like, it's like, oh, no, a man raped a woman. Oh, a man killed a woman. Oh, a man showed up and like stabbed a bunch of people. And they're reporting on it as a woman. And it's fucked. And in Canada, the government started, Stats Canada is now reporting on, they're recording victims and perpetrators based on their gender identity, not their sex. So if a man commits a crime and he identifies as a woman, they're going to record it as a woman. And that's really messed up, because now how do we track male violence against women? Male violence against women is still a really big problem, and this is going to mess with the stats big time.
And I know that that's a very, you know, important point, but an important section to keep the stats on. But any stat, I mean, male suicide, for example, you know, and that's obviously a very high number. And if that person is then being listed as female, it's this is going to be an interesting conversation.
Well, and you know, and what stats do in part, there's I'm sure a multitude of reasons why this is a bad thing that other people have, you know, that I'm not aware of all the problems, but like one of the problems is that organizations will get funding based on stats. Mm-hmm. So they'll put funding into, you know, for example, transition houses, shelters, rape crisis shelters, services for women generally based on stats, based on what's happening. Same thing for men, right?
Yeah.
And if we're messing with those stats and we're not recording accurately, then that's going to impact funding, and that's going to impact services, which is a big deal. I mean, women are always, and marginalized people in general are always kind of underserviced, mm-hmm. right? So...
Is there two layers of this for you? Is there sort of an academic societal push, and is there a personal layer as well? If there was a transgender woman in the studio with us today, would you overtly refer to that person as he in front of them, or would you call her she? Or that's what I'm thinking. That on a personal level, is it different from what you're trying to achieve and like educate society on?
Yeah, I mean, on a personal level, I don't know that I would feel so obligated to, if I was talking to a friend and this friend was transsexual or whatever, I really don't think I would feel obligated to be like, he. I also think that if it was a friend, this person probably wouldn't be enforcing that on me, and they probably wouldn't, be offended or pissed off if I did. But no, like in private conversation with somebody... whatever, like, but we're having a public conversation.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm talking about.
I mean, I wouldn't say to that person, yeah, you're literally female. But I doubt they would try to say that to me, like if we were actually people who got along, because I probably wouldn't. You mean that you doubt that they'd say I'm literally female? It just doesn't seem likely that I would be very good friends with somebody who was trying to convince me that they're literally female when they're male. But on a personal level, things are different than when we're having a public conversation. We're talking about policy, legislation, and when I'm sort of normalizing something. So when you're talking publicly and you're normalizing this idea that a man is a woman and saying she, it might be polite. I mean, it annoys me that Joe Rogan does this, because I think he's like basically on side with my analysis, and he thinks it's a big problem. He thinks it's a problem in sports when men are competing against women. But just to be nice, he'll say she. He says she, and it pisses me off, because I'm like, you know, like I know you're just trying to be nice, but this has larger implications, and you have this big platform, and you're sort of teaching people by doing this, and you're normalizing something.
But maybe he's not just trying to be nice. Maybe that's his line. I mean, I know that when he started talking about this overall issue, it was because of Fallon Fox. That's when he laid his cards down. So I think a lot of his position is based around sports, especially combat sports.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's not him trying to be nice. Maybe, like I personally, I don't have a problem calling, you know, a transgender woman she. I was interested to get your take on that, though, to see if it was, as I say, more of a public conversation point you're making. Like, I mean, not even talking about friends. And I'm thinking about Peterson again, Dr. Peterson, because he often gets asked, if this was your student, how would you refer to them? And he often says she, because in that connotation, he just says, well, that's different. That's different from actually saying the government has to tell me
exactly
to use these words. And I often find in conversation, if you changed what the subject matter was and tried to apply the same rules, that's when we have a real conversation. So this is New Zealand, right? You're in New Zealand. Welcome. We also call this country Aotearoa.
Right.
Like very, very, like the indigenous Māori, we use Māori language a lot and interspersed with English. But if a government came out and said, by law now, you must call the country Aotearoa, and if you don't, there could be legislative issues for you, there'd be an uproar. Mm-hmm. Because it's not about a protected group of people, and it wouldn't have the same amount of controversy around it for people to push back against that. Pushing back against this, it seems to be because it's involving the transgender community that it's more heightened. But the actual idea of someone saying, government, you can't force me to use words, we'll stop the conversation there, not say what words they are, seems completely reasonable.
Just at all. You can't force us to speak in a way that we don't feel comfortable speaking. I mean, if we choose to, that's a totally different thing. If we choose to out of respect or whatever. I mean, and there's also, again, like, it's like about a skin in the game kind of thing. Like, it annoys me a little bit, but I also get it why, like, a man would be like, whatever, just call her she. Like, what's it to you? Like, because it doesn't really make any difference to you.
No,
it makes
completely.
more difference to, and not even to me. Like, this isn't a personal issue for me. Like, this doesn't even impact me at all. Like, I'm not in prison. I'm not in a transition house. Like, I'm not... like, it's not me. It's sort of other women that I'm worried about, other women who are in these spaces who are vulnerable. And, for them to be gaslighted in this way, like, I do see it as a form of gaslighting. And again, it's this larger context where women and men are socialized in different ways. And where men are sort of socialized to ignore boundaries, and predatorial men, especially predatorial men, of course their whole thing is to ignore women's boundaries, and rape or assault or sexually harass or just make women feel uncomfortable, and women and girls are kind of compelled to go along with it or socialized to go along with it, or they feel that they can't say no for whatever reason, and then for those women to have to say she, I mean, that there's more implications. And that hurts women more than it would hurt you. I mean, what difference does it make to you if you call a man she? Like, this man isn't a danger to you. I mean. So
the pushback from that, and look, I want to make it clear, this is not like an ambush conversation. I haven't brought you down here to kind of go, you're wrong, this is what we think.
No.
But I'm interested to investigate all the options. So what I'm going to say is the pushback to that would be, because I've heard the pushback to that, would be, well, you're using the word transition houses. I think we should make it clear. You're talking about, like, for example, if a woman is in a violent relationship, because transition also implies transgender, like they transition, but you're talking about like a halfway house for women to get out of an abusive relationship, for example.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. Yeah. So I'm talking
like women's refuge, we'd call it in New Zealand.
Oh, right, of course. And in the UK, that's the same term, I think. Yeah.
So that's the kind of, I'm just making that clear for people.
Where a woman would go to escape violence, and their kids are there also. So it's women and children. So the pushback would be, because I've heard it, and look, I'm not even saying that these are the statistical truths. You will know, I guess, is that doesn't happen. That people in these halfway houses, the women's refuge, aren't being abused by transgender female men identifying as women. So again, is it an academic concern or is it a very real concern? Well, in Canada, in these transition houses and shelters, there are men being allowed into these shelters because of these new policies, and there are assaults that's happened and sexual harassment. So it has happened in women's shelter.
Because I understand it academically as well. I understand, and look, I'm 6'4" and 150 kilos, so I don't have any concerns at all. But I understand a 5'2", 55 kilo woman who's just been abused goes into a women's refuge, and in comes a form of someone who's 6'1" and 100 kilos. I understand how that could be triggering and concerning, and the worst things in the world.
And dangerous. But and also that they feel unsafe.
But even if that person has is no threat, like if they're not going to abuse them or whatever, I can understand how that smaller, more vulnerable female would feel it. And this is part of this conversation at the moment. Is I understand and I accept the hard time that a transgender person in the transgender community has, what they're going through with things like suicide rates. But I can understand that woman in the women's refuge and what she's going through, and how do we in society protect a group?
I mean, it's easy. Like, it's like
sure.
either what needs to happen is that we need to build spaces to service trans-identified males specifically. Or we create more spaces for men who need protection. I mean, I sort of think like it's like, why can't these men use men's shelters just because they identify as trans? Like what? And if it's that men are being violent towards other men who identify as trans, then I feel like that's work that men need to do. Like men should be accepting men who don't conform to gender stereotypes, gender roles in their spaces. It doesn't, like, women shouldn't be taking that on. Women shouldn't be made to feel unsafe and vulnerable because men are being shitty to other men.
I've talked about this example several times. There is a politician in New Zealand called Rodney Hyde, ex-politician. He's actually part of the ACT Party, which you've had some interactions with David Seymour with. And I used to interview him and ask him about his voting record, and he'd always say, I always vote for the thing that brings freedom. But unfortunately, in lots of cases where you vote to bring freedom to a group, you impact or oppress another group. And what I hear you saying, and I wonder if this is part of the debate, well, I kind of know it is part of the debate, is that giving rights and freedoms and, access or whatever to this group of people definitely does, whatever the word is, negatively impacts this group of people.
I guess I would ask what... I mean, I know that you're not necessarily advocating this position and you're sort of trying to represent my opposition or whatever, but I would ask what rights trans people who identify as trans don't have.
So this is what happened to me last weekend, right? I interviewed someone who made me think quite a lot about it. And this is where I have no idea. I'm in flux. And look, just to let you know my background, I don't typically do the kind of, devil's advocate will say, I'm really like, what the fuck is this all about? I'm like, that's really genuinely where I am. And when people say to me, you shouldn't have you on, I spoke to someone and I said, Meghan Murphy, do you know who Meghan Murphy is? And they went, no. And I went, she's probably most well famous for known for being booted off Twitter for saying men aren't women. Like half a second, so she's transphobic. Like half a second. Like as quick as that.
Oh, she's a bigot.
Like didn't know anything else, didn't know any kind of narrative, nothing. But as quick as that, it's just like, and I'm kind of getting pulled pillar to post. I'm a fairly, like if you look at my political leanings, people will be aware of this. When I used to work on Talkback, he used to criticize me a lot. I did one of those. In fact, Jace, if you wanted to, you could go to my Facebook page. I think I put it up. I did one of those political compass things. Came out 93% Green Party. Now in New Zealand, you don't get much more left unless you're the Alliance Party. That's one further, but basically that's about as far as you can go to the left. So that's where I politically sit. But also I'm a beast who works in logic. And a lot of my kind of pushback in this area has started in the sports area. Watching people who are biologically born women biologically born men transitioning to women and then competing against biologically born women, cisgender women who have stayed women, and wiping the floor with them. Yeah. Breaking records all over the world and winning races and not a problem. And I'm kind of been going, that doesn't seem fair. So this was my thing last. Sorry, this is a bit long-winded, but I'll tell you, this is exactly where I am. Oh, there you go. So that's my thing from. So look, 93% opportunities by Labour. So I'm There ain't no. Yeah, I'm as fucking left as I come, apparently.
So in New Zealand I have to apologize for not totally understanding how politics work over here. But is the Green Party more left than the Labour Party?
Yeah. So what you'd go is Green Party left. We don't really have that far left or far right.
Okay.
But you'd go Green Party left, Labour Party centre left, National Party centre right, ACT Party right. Would that be fair, Jace?
Excuse my
although if you compare it. I've heard a lot of people say if you compare New Zealand politics to American politics, pretty much everybody except ACT would almost be middle, and even our rightist wing, like basically the National Party and Labour Party is Democrat, National Party is Republican, for lack of a better description, and even our National Party, who is Republican in their policies, when it comes to economic stuff, would be considered very centrist in New Zealand.
America,
very very centrist country.
Talk to an American, and see the National Party at 25%. That's where my support would be.
So is this the spectrum?
Yeah, pretty much.
It's okay.
I mean, like for example, there's even ones there like the Conservative Party. They won't get into Parliament, but they're still represented there because obviously they're the Opportunities Party actually don't have someone in government. So these are a party, and actually this is an older one because that's Bill English, isn't it? He's no longer the leader of the National Party. But you speak to an American about our quote unquote right wing national government when they were in, and our leader John Key, who kept interest-free student loans, working for families, which is basically a tax rebate for parents with kids, and a couple of other things like that, and free healthcare. And Americans kind of go, well, that's not a right-wing party, that's a left-wing party, but that's our right-wing party. So it's not the same as America, but that's sort of on our spectrum. That's what you'd call it.
Yeah, and that I feel like that's sort of similar to Canada. Sorry, I need to focus on the mic thing. But like our Conservative Party is nothing compared to the right in the US, right? Our Conservative Party in Canada is not that conservative in comparison to the right in the US.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, of course, leftists like to pretend like the Conservative Party is like exactly the same because they want something to be really mad about. And I've never voted Conservative in my life, but I'm just saying, it's like, give me a break, you guys, you're fine. Like Canadians are like probably some of the most privileged people in the entire world, and they just really want to feel like they have some drum to beat, and they really don't. But yeah, so similar kind of spectrum.
Well, we're both in the Commonwealth. Is that probably a part of it as well?
Right.
I wonder if part of that kind of monarchy thing plays into our politics a little bit as well. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to be, probably our politics and your politics are more similar. It's all that Westminster system compared to the nutters that live just south of you.
Yeah. Different histories.
But what I was going to say is, so that's where I sit. Yet there's a part of me which kind of goes, and it's this all or nothing thing, right? It's this all or nothing. You're either all in or you're not in at all. And so I go, and I've said this before on this podcast, if people Google my name and they put LGBT beside it, for 15 years I've been an ally in that world. I was a very loud voice, especially from a religious background, as to why same-sex marriage should be legalised. It's an area of my life I've been really passionate about. So part of me goes, it's really uncomfortable for me to go transgender women shouldn't be competing against biological women in sports because there needs to be nuance there. No. And it seems that in the world at the moment, we're not allowed to have nuance. And you see it in stand-up comedy and you see it all over the place. And what happened last weekend was I was talking about Caster Semenya. And I told you about the researchers. We had a conversation, Jace, about the researchers that we had in talking about the transgender woman competing in sports a few weeks ago from Otago University. And I disagreed with them with the Caster Semenya situation because they were of the opinion that she should reduce her testosterone as well. That's what the doping agency says. But I'm like, hang on, she has a naturally born advantage. It's how she was born. Just like Michael Phelps has a naturally born advantage that his muscles produce less lactic acid, enabling him to push harder. And if it's a naturally born advantage, I'm like, but I don't think that she should have to reduce that. And then what I got challenged with was, is a transgender woman, is that a naturally born condition, like a gay person is gay from birth?
And of course it's not. I mean, there's no way to determine what trans is. I mean, what is it? What does trans even mean? Like, this is what I cannot get an answer. Like, I say this over and over. I say, like, what does it mean? What's your definition of transgender? And nobody will tell you. They'll just say it's just you identify as. Like, it doesn't mean anything.
If it's not from birth, like I talk about a gay person. someone who's gay, most people would agree that probably 99% of society would agree that person is gay when they're born, gay through their life.
It's actually not. And I mean, so to me, like, I mean, I don't know if you've read Douglas Murray's new book, but he talks about this and, lots of other, gay rights activists, whatever you want to call them, whatever. I mean, to me, and I mean, I don't want to say to me because I'm not gay or lesbian, so I don't get to speak on behalf of these people, but it doesn't matter. I mean, you're born, you're not born, who cares? You have the right to love who you want to love. Like, I obviously, like, I support gay and lesbian people to have the same rights as heterosexual people and to be in the relationships they want to be in. And it shouldn't matter if you're born that way or not. And I think that research shows that it could be a combination of both. And some people might be born that way and some people there might be other factors, and who cares? But I know that it legitimizes it if you say, born that way or whatever, but that shouldn't be the issue. The issue should be like, you have the right to love who you want to love and be in a relationship with who you want to be in a relationship with. With trans, I mean, it's just not the same thing because it's like, okay, so maybe you have a mental illness. Like, is that what we're talking about? There's something in your brain that's telling you you're born in the wrong body. Right?
Well, then that body, I always get it wrong, dysmorphia?
Yeah, well, so the term that people generally use is gender dysphoria. And the term that I use is body dysmorphia, because I don't think that the term gender dysphoria makes any sense, because we're talking about, so I guess I should explain. When I'm talking about sex, because people use these words interchangeably.
Yeah.
When I'm talking about sex, I'm just talking about biology. So whether or not this is distracting, sorry. Whether or not you're male or female, your biology, that's it, nothing more. Gender, we're talking about social roles. So we're talking about the stereotypes that are applied to people based on their sex. So what we assume a man is, trucks, how he should act.
Girls like pink.
Right. What kinds of jobs he should have, like how they should behave.
She should be a nurse. He should be a doctor.
She's naturally nurturing. He's naturally aggressive, blah, blah, blah. So if we're talking about gender dysphoria, that doesn't make any sense to me, because I kind of think everybody has gender dysphoria. Like, I don't feel like I fit all these stereotypes attached to femininity. You probably don't feel like you fit all these stereotypes attached to masculinity. Like, there's lots of...
I am a very masculine man, though.
I mean, I am feminine, too. Like, it's like I do... Like, I have long hair and I have long nails and I wear makeup.
You didn't know where the air filter on your car was.
No, I had to change the air filter on my car for me. So I'm not that masculine.
But the irony is, I probably feel like... In general, personally, I feel probably less masculine than you do, even though I know how to fix a car. Yeah. So it's just such
But apparently...
I drive like a big old truck, and I know how to change my own coolant. I mean, a man taught me how, but... Thank you.
Do you know how to change... Do you know how to change the indicator fluid, though? That's the big thing.
I don't know what indicator fluid.
Indicator
fluid.
Indicator fluid is one of those things that it's like, when a builder, it's like a builder asking their apprentice to go get a long weight. It's one of those, like...
It's a trick.
It's a trick,
You can't lie to me or make those kinds of jokes, because I will totally buy it.
That's what those jokes exist for, yeah.
We were at the bar... it's just mean to me, because I'll be like, really? Oh my God, this girl at the bar... One of the women from the panel last night, we were at the bar, and she told me, we were talking about Australia, and I was like, I would be terrified to go to Australia. Everything scary lives in Australia. Like, all the poisonous things.
She's talking about drop beers.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was like, what?
They're a very
that
real
sounds
threat.
so cute.
Yeah,
and she was like, it's a joke. And I was like, okay, well, you can't. I'm just gonna go along with it. Anyway, this is a long distraction, but so there's lots of ways that I obviously present as feminine, and like I do
adhere to the stereotypes.
But not in all ways, and never in all ways. And when I was a young woman, when I was a teenager, when I was in my early 20s, and I think tons and tons of women will be able to relate to this, as well as men too, in terms of masculinity, is that I struggled because I felt like I should be a way that I wasn't. So I was like, why can't I be like these girls I see on TV? Like, why does this feel uncomfortable to me? Why can't I act like this? Like, why do I feel like I'm not right in some way? And there's not something wrong with me. It's just that I am who I am. And these are stereotypes. And I'm not a naturally, these are some examples. I'm not a naturally nurturing person. Like, I don't necessarily think that I'm over emotional. I certainly don't think I'm irrational. I don't think that I'm passive. I don't behave like a proper lady. You can see me not behaving like a proper lady right now. Like and you sort of are forced and pressured to adhere to these stereotypes. And so naturally you feel uncomfortable because you're a human
and
you're yourself.
The other thing, I had this conversation with someone the other day who was saying, feeling like being like Eddie Izzard. Eddie Izzard, the comedian, he's a British comedian. Back 20 years ago, he was a transvestite. Now he's
yes, of course.
Now he's transgender. Been in the Oceans movies and that kind of stuff. He's a great comedian. I heard him on Rogan actually. And look, get that one, the second line down to the left. Yep. So that's him presenting as feeling a bit female that day, and that's how he kind of describes it. Sometimes he feels like. Feels he has a girl's day, and sometimes he feels like he has a boy's day. I mean, Sam Smith came out recently, the musician, talking about being, so I saw that eye roll, talking about being on the gender spectrum, and now they're actually saying I don't know how she, it, it's probably pretty aggressive. He possibly can be entering awards as a female artist, because depending
ridiculous
on how you're presenting on that day. But what I said to this person is, I've been a guy most of my life, all of my life. I don't know what it feels like to be a man. Like, I don't know. I don't understand that term. What does it feel like to be a guy? I don't know. So it's confusing to me, people saying, I'm feeling this or I'm feeling that. I mean, are they feeling more nurturing? What does that feel like? I'm very nurturing. I've got 3 children, who might be at home watching this. Shouldn't be watching this. But who, I'm very nurturing to them. I'm a solo dad and,
I know, and I mean, I've been in lots of relationships with men where I felt like I was like the cold one, the like non-nurturing one, the non-like mushy one, the one that didn't like to like cuddle as much, or the one who was like, like, no, leave me alone, I gotta work, I need space, like, and sometimes not, but I think that I don't know what it feels like to be a woman either. That doesn't mean anything. What is it? It's not about a feeling. It's like you're female or you're male. And then you have a personality for various reasons, including evolution, but also including socialization, including how you're raised, including just the way you're born. Like, nobody really knows for sure why anyone is the way they are entirely. I have a twin, and we're very different. We're fraternal, but we're very different. We have very different lives. She goes to bed at 9 p.m. every night and wakes up at like 5 a.m. I'm up till like 2, 3 a.m. every night, and I sleep till noon. That's not the only difference. Like, there's a million different. I'm more fun. I'm joking. I really like my sister.
Haven't you posted this to your Facebook page? She'll hear that. So part of this conversation,
she knows that we're different. She's more responsible than I am. We are kind of going all over the place. Is what we always do. Right. But part of this conversation was always also about that we, a few whiskeys ago. Whoa, pardon me. There goes the whiskey. I'll be doing that soon, I'm sure, in a very ladylike way. One of the things I love is Tom Segura, the comedian, and his wife Christina P. They do a podcast, and they have a fart mic. So it's under the table, and they try and get at least one fart. And this is like a man thing. No, she's the one that's grosser about it. Okay, then I guess I'm being sexist. We're gonna need to get a bigger. I'm anti-fart. I think it's gross. If you want fart mics, we're gonna need a bigger mixing desk. Ladies don't fart. Back to this idea. That's very sexist. Back to the idea of as you are born, and I think for me. This whole conversation. So I was having this conversation a weekend ago on one of our podcasts, and we were talking about gender. And my guest, lovely person, respect her immensely, like talking to her, want to talk to her again, was talking about being a certain gender from birth. And I was like, well, hang on. For such a long time, especially amongst the feminist movement, especially people like Germaine Greer and those have been educating us that gender is a social construct. You can't have gender as a social construct and have gender from birth. You have one or the other. And if it's not from birth and it's a social construct, then where does that leave us in this conversation? And then my head exploded, and I realized I need to keep talking and thinking about this. But it seems, and this is where I've come to in this and many other conversations, I feel like we are in society at the moment in such an area of flux with language that we are using different words for different things. And part of the conversation is Party A is saying this about gender and Party B is saying this about gender, and they're actually using those terms completely differently. And one of the things I heard Jordan Peterson say was the reason that a government would have to compel speech is because society doesn't want to pick up that speech. It's like speech and words in general, they have a natural evolution. Like in New Zealand, we have lots of slang words. We say choice.
Well, we used to say choice, and that was like a way of going cool, choice drink.
Right. I feel like that's like a 90s thing.
Yeah. It's not, and my kids don't do it, so yeah, there's something from back in the day.
Like I feel like Canadians maybe did that in the 90s too. So,
but that grew and that evolved, and that was picked up by.
And it became scucks.
Scucks, bro.
In the 2000s.
I've never heard scucks.
Oh, that's because of Taika
Kiwi,
Waititi. And he did Taika Waititi, the director of Thor Ragnarok, and he's just done Jojo Rabbit, and you don't know him. So you're not from New Zealand. This is a little bit offensive now. I've just become offended all of a sudden.
Sorry.
The fact that you haven't
like,
seen,
wow, those are some interesting words.
So he
Pacific Island Jew playing Hitler in a comedy about it as an imaginary boy.
It's very funny.
Okay.
But anyway, in one of his movies, it was Scucks As, bro, SKUX, and that was like then picked up as like the new choice. But the point that Peterson was making, and I was going to do the quote without saying who it was from, because if I'd have just said that, language is picked up naturally, and if it's not picked up naturally, it falls away because society doesn't want it. People wouldn't disagree with that. But when you say Jordan Peterson says, people go, that's not true. And one of the points he made people can Google it. It's like a 55-minute clip where he debated in Canada on a television show with like 5 other people. And he's basically, I am paraphrasing, he's basically saying the society doesn't want, quote unquote, these words, the compelled speech, and that's why the government has to compel them. If you actually just let it flow naturally, these words would disappear anyway, because that's how language works. And I wonder about that, and I wonder if that's true. But then the counterpoint is always, especially in America, which Canada's not, and I think that was a point that was made several times in this debate. There's a difference between freedom of speech and freedom of expression. I think is the Canadian version of freedom of speech. Is that there were certain words that I guess the point is that the people were forced to stop using, like the N-word, for example, and that became a crime or criminally possible. So the government has stopped people using words, but the difference is it that much of a bigger step to start people using words? And this was the debate.
I mean, in Canada, at least, it seems that there are certain words, specifically within this gender identity conversation, that have been taken up, and it's not that it's necessarily legal. So words like cisgender, so it's, and actually on in New Zealand they're using this term also, because on the News Hub Nation.
News Hub, it's one of our TV.
Yep.
And so the guy that was interviewing me told me that I was a cis woman, and I was like, I'm not a cis woman. Like, I don't identify with femininity. Like, cis means you identify with the gender you were born with, or the gender imposed on you at birth.
Unsigned at birth.
Yeah, so I don't identify with femininity. I'm not a woman because I identify with all these stereotypes, as I said earlier. So I'm totally in opposition to this word. I think it's a sexist word.
So you're
it's being
woman
imposed on me, and the media is using it, and they're saying cisgender, and this is a word that basically was invented by academics, like gender studies academics.
Right. So would you say that you're a woman because what?
I'm female.
XX chromosome.
I'm female. It's not just chromosomes. Like it is chromosomes, but it's also like, it's just not complicated. People are acting like it's like confusing to know who's a woman and who's a man. And at the end of the day, it's like, like, do you produce sperm or ova? Like, do you produce eggs or sperm? Everyone knows how babies are made, and that's how you can tell, for the most part, who's male and who's female. There's abnormalities, of course, and then there's intersex conditions. But, again, that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about trans. We're talking about obviously male or obviously female people wanting to identify as something else for whatever reason. They want to feel special. They have some kind of mental illness. They have gender dysphoria, body dysmorphia. They feel like their body's wrong. Or they just don't identify with those stereotypes, as most of us do.
Do you think...
Or do not, I should say.
It feels like that this is something that is here to stay. Is permanently going to be with us?
Nah. 10 years from now, we're going to be like, what were you talking about? That was weird, hey?
You reckon?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
You don't think it's just going to become...
And 10 years from now, there's going to be like 1 billion lawsuits from these trans kids who grew up and were like, oh, man, you ruined my body, and now I'm sterile and I'm fucked, and I have all these other we don't even know all the implications of going on these hormones, but we do know that it renders kids as adults sterile, We know that it increases the risk of cancer. There's all sorts of, there's not enough long-term research, but there's going to be, I guarantee there's going to be a bunch of lawsuits from these people whose bodies have been like totally fucked up, and they were told, you'll get all these surgeries and then you'll literally be female, and they realize they're not, and they just have a fucked up body. They can't enjoy sex, they can't give birth, or they can't, whatever, they can't have kids. Like
the idea of hormone blockers, I read something just the other day about a high profile young transgender American put on hormone blockers, and apart from anything else, apart from what you're selling, the downstream negative effects, that because a male to female transition, because she didn't go through a natural puberty as a male.
Yeah.
Her penis didn't grow.
Jennings? Yeah.
Penis didn't grow, and
Yeah.
because the penis didn't grow, couldn't actually get the surgery to make a vagina, because that's a part of the process. So actually, the hormone blockers actually stopped her from transitioning as she wanted as an adult as well. Let alone anything else you've said, just purely from the side of, if you did want to continue on that path, it's detrimental as well.
Yeah, and it's really sad. And it's like, it feels weird to talk about other people's bodies or sex lives, especially when they're underage. But it's not, a kid or a youth isn't equipped to make a decision about whether or not they want to have kids as adults, or whether or not they want to enjoy sex. Literally, like, these people are going to be like not able to orgasm, and that's like a really enjoyable, important, good part of people's lives. And you can't explain that to a kid, because how would a kid know?
Well, that's the other thing. You can't explain to a kid how terrible this fantastic whiskey would be to their system, so we just don't give it to them.
Yeah,
or the cigarette,
exactly.
or the how they're not old enough to yet drive a car, because
they don't get to make decisions that will impact their lives for their lives.
And this seems to be another aspect of this conversation. There are some people who go, you're 25, you're 22, you're making adult decisions for yourself, for your own life, more power to you. But kids, leave them alone. That seems to be maybe not a third aspect of this conversation, but another one on top. That there is a group of people saying, personally, if you want to do it, go for it. But imposing it on a child, or allowing a child to make that decision at 11, is ludicrous.
Yeah, there's no way that a child can make those kinds of decisions or understand the implications or the future harms.
So if you think this is going to disappear in 10 years from now...
maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years, but I do think, people are getting pissed off. The sports thing is like a big thing. Like, I find that a lot of people have sort of gotten engaged in this debate and gotten pissed off about what's going on because of the sports thing, because it's so obvious. Like, you see this tall, big dude standing next to women, and you're like, no, like, this is unfair. Like, this is a lot of men have gotten on board because of the sports thing, because men know that they're stronger than women. Like, they know that that's unfair. Like,
yeah, right. So you say got on board with the argument.
Yeah. So they're being like, okay, wait a minute. Like, I still haven't watched this episode. I have to watch. I know everyone's talking about it.
Let me just say, can you bring up that News Hub one first of all, because there's an article at the end of it. There's a couple of articles. So you know how I said to you when I explained who you were in one sentence about kicked off Twitter, and someone went really quickly, oh, so she's transphobic. Like, no other information. Last two paragraphs. Scroll up. Yep, stop. So Rachel McKinnon, who is a transgender world track cycling champion, has come out saying that this episode of South Park was transphobic and lazy. And then this is what I'm about. It's kind of, in fact, we were talking with Di yesterday, another guest we
Rachel
had.
McKinnon, the mediocre athlete who's now setting records in female cycling.
We had a conversation yesterday about how do you get back into society once you're like a Louis C.K. How does he come back into society after being wronged and doing something? Do we just throw them under the bus forever or not? And the attitude from this is just throwing people away. So this is what she said, Rachel McKinnon. She's an academic as well, from my understanding. South Park has been deeply transphobic the entire time. She quote, "This isn't their first explicitly transphobic storyline. It won't be their last. Stone and Parker are transphobe. Write them off. Ignore their lazy show."
No one cares what you think, Rachel McKinnon. Like, people who watch South Park are not the kind of people who are going to be like, transphobia. Like South Park is like so offensive. Not offensive to me. I think South Park is great, but it's like the audience is not the like call out culture, cancel culture audience. So like, give me a break.
But the thing about this episode, and I have seen it, and what they do basically is at the end of it, they come to a point where the conclusion is, wow, there's probably more nuance needed to this conversation than what's going on right now. That's the conclusion of the episode. And I think that's a perfectly fine conclusion to talk about this side is bang, this side is bang, and actually until we get to some conversation in the middle, maybe that's going to stay conflict like this. I'm looking at you as I say that, I'm thinking you probably think that kind of this side bang has got the right answers. It should be like that.
I mean,
do you think there should be more nuance, or do you think that your position is
there is no nuance? I mean, there's male athletes and there's female athletes. I mean, it's not there's no. If you reduce your testosterone, so this is what they're saying, you know, like men who identify as women or trans women or whatever who are athletes, if they reduce their testosterone to a certain level, then they can compete with women. It's fair. And it's not true. I mean, there's no reducing your testosterone doesn't change your body. It doesn't rid you of the advantage that you have as a male. You've already developed as a male. You've already gone through puberty. You already have, you know, more muscle mass, different bone structure, longer limbs, bigger organs. You're most likely taller. There's just so many differences between males and females physically. Like your skin is different. I told you this earlier. You move your body differently. The way you walk is different. So yeah, it's ridiculous to say that. So I don't think there is nuance. There's not. I mean, if you want to go on hormones or reduce your testosterone, then go for it. But then maybe you can't be an athlete. Like maybe you can't compete in sports anymore. You don't need to do that. That's a choice that you're making. So don't make that choice.
And that comes back to that conversation you said way earlier about it's not like we're trying to exclude you from the club. You know, I that's where I tend to sit as well. You know, elite sports is probably not a place for transgender women. We don't hear the conversation from transgender men. And I'm using the term that you won't use, but that's how I think about it, because they don't dominate sports. You made the perfect point with Rachel McKinnon, and I've made this point before, and I've actually done the research. We have an athlete in New Zealand, Laurel Hubbard, who's a weightlifter. You know, she was a favourite to win the gold at the last Commonwealth Games. She got injured and had to pull out, etc., etc. I did it deep because she is the daughter of a very famous man. Hubbard's is a cereal brand in New Zealand, and her father was
I didn't know that. I have heard of Laurel Hubbard.
Yeah, her father was the mayor of Auckland, so it's not hard to find out what her quote-unquote dead name is. Not that I'll do it on air, but what it is. And then searching that name for weightlifting results, I found one that was a kind of third or fourth on Queensland's coast. And now Laurel Hubbard is, you know, breaking world records.
Yeah.
And you've just said it about Rachel McKinnon. It would seem to me that the conversation about is there an advantage is over, because there clearly is. The conversation in society, and you won't agree with this, but the conversation in society from my aspect should be, are we okay with that advantage? Because I think people saying there's no advantage, that's gone. And like I said, Jace, I can't remember their names, I'm terrible at this. The guys we had in a couple of weeks ago, the academic, can you just bring up their podcast just so we can give them a shout out? Not that, crumbs, what's that horrific photo you've got there? They very clearly laid out all the, there you go, Alison Heather and Lindley Anderson. So from Otago University, academics, laid out all the research, pointed to things that happen in utero, like testosterone in utero that changes the physical body, that gives boy babies bigger lungs and girl babies smaller lungs because they have to have room for a womb.
Yeah.
So that does things like that, different synapses in the brain that fire in different ways between. None of that changes. And they were really respectful. I would encourage anyone to watch that episode. They were doing things like, they wanted to make sure they wouldn't mention any athletes' names until I was a dick and mentioned Caster Semenya because I forgot. But they actually wouldn't. And they wanted to make it very clear that no one is cheating, because, you know, even though you may disagree with it, everyone's playing by the rules at the moment. The Olympic Committee has said you are allowed to do this. So a Laurel Hubbard or a Rachel McKinnon are not cheating. They're just, according to the rules. So but they were trying to, they wanted to make sure that the focus of the conversation was on the research. And so they were very, very careful. And then going through testosterone, you know, a hit of testosterone in puberty, heart gets bigger, you know, more white blood cells, carries the blood.
Lungs.
Yeah. So I think that conversation's, from my opinion, that conversation's over.
Yeah.
There is an advantage from me looking into society going, the next conversation is, now that we acknowledge there is an advantage, do we accept that? Now, that's not your conversation. I'm saying that's what I think a lot of us are now talking about. Well, not literally talking, but I think that's the next evolution of this conversation. There is an advantage. Are we cool with this?
Because that just to jump in, that conversation isn't even a new one necessarily when it comes to female-male advantage. You just have to look at golf. I played golf growing up, and there's literally male and female tees. And so even, at the invention of golf, however many hundreds of years ago, there was acknowledgement of the advantage. And it could have been that was totally a social construct, that they just saw women as the weaker sex, and so that was just the patriarch imposing on that. And then in general,
well, physically weaker, it's true. Like it's like it sounds like an insult today or whatever, because people want to pretend like we're equal. Well, that's the thing.
I remember, when I was a young man, I went to the gym because I was, wanting to go to the gym and give my money away and pay a fat tax once I stopped. And I started at the gym. I hadn't been to the gym. I'd never been to the gym in my life. And I started doing, I don't even know what they're called, bicep curls, lifting weights, doing that on the machine. And I started doing 40 kgs or something like that, I think. My sisters, who are both very, very physically fit,
rugby players,
actually one of them was at a first division level, both went to the gym, and my other sister, who was actually physically larger than my other sister, so therefore muscular, much more sort of has a better frame for muscles, she said, wow, I can do 10, and I've been going to the gym for like a year.
And
it's just it's just the way it is.
I actually started lifting weights this year, and I feel like, and I've been doing it for like a year and a half, and it's like I'm improving a lot. And I think, but in comparison to what the dudes who just started are lifting, it's nothing. Like, it's pathetic. And it's like, I'm never going to be able to lift as much as these guys who haven't even been lifting weights for as long as I have.
It is funny, though, you talk about, it sounds like an insult. I mean, when we had the professors in the
it's not. I wish that people could just be like, okay, this is the reality.
But this is the point. She was talking about throwing like a girl. And, that is sort of an insult. If you tell a boy, oh, you throw like a girl, it's taken as an insult. But the point she was making was how the ratio between the elbow and the hip for women is different to a man. So actually the arm goes out further, and there is actually an action, which is throwing as a female form does.
It's different.
And I actually said to her in the podcast, it feels really weird. You keep saying throwing like a girl because it feels like an insult. But she was using it in a medical and academically correct way. And I said to her, well, what about, like softball's very big in New Zealand. We have very good softball teams, especially at the top level. And I said, see some of these girls just whipping it across. And they basically said, well, you'll find that they don't have the same hip to elbow ratio. And there are, she didn't use the word anomalies, but, there are slight differences in the physical. And probably girls who throw the best are the ones who have a closer to a male form than a wide-hipped female form. And that's why.
Yeah, and I mean, I actually, and golf is like a good example, because it's not like golf is like feats of strength or like, wrestling. Like it's not, there's no like physical fight, and you're not going to get injured. Like in lots of sports, like if you're playing rugby and there's a dude playing rugby against women, then women are, maybe going to get hurt. Same thing in wrestling. And, but golf is a good example because I don't know anything about golf, but it's, about form and what.
Yeah, more timing than anything. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I actually shouldn't talk about golf because actually golf, like this thing that I've done maybe once.
It's interesting, because the thing is, having played golf, it's not about strength.
Yeah.
It's totally, I'm a terrible golfer.
Like it's about form, I assume?
It's about form.
Yeah.
So there is absolutely, I'm a terrible golfer, and so I guarantee that I'm probably worse than most average females at golf because it's all about form. But for some reason, I think when it comes to the final hit, there's just that little bit of power is required.
Well, it's not just power though. You think about a fulcrum. You think about if you're coming up from a higher.
If a male on average is higher with longer arms and can swing that, can get that club moving just 15% faster. Which I think I'd have to look it up, but I think the tees aren't much bit different. I think maybe 20 feet on maybe a par 4. Which
it depends.
Maybe 3 or 4% closer.
Right.
Which is just acknowledging that they obviously got a bunch of women together and got them to hit a ball and got a bunch of men together and averaged it out and said this is the difference.
Yeah, I mean, there's a problem, and it's partly like feminism's fault, actually. But this thing where like equality is the wrong term to use when you're seeking, women's rights. Like, it's not about men and women being the same. They're not the same. And we sort of progressed past equal rights, and so being treated equally in the workplace and ensuring that women have equal access to education and positions in politics, obviously to vote, things like that, to function as autonomous independent beings. And we sort of progressed to this: men and women are the same, and women can do everything men can do, and men can do everything that women can do, and we're all exactly the same. There's no differences, and it's obviously not true. So we sort of need to backtrack a bit and acknowledge that there are differences, and it's fine. We're different.
Do you think,
acknowledging the fact that we're currently in New Zealand, the first country in the developed world to give women the vote? So there you go. Kate Shepherd was the word? What's the word I'm looking for? Suffragettes. Yeah. First country in the world to give women the vote. There you go.
Do you
Way to
think
go.
in the 1980s, places like Sesame Street pushed it, and they went all over the world. They were here, obviously. Girls can do anything. Do you think that's played into this? Because girls can't do anything, just like boys can't do anything. There are some things that we can and we can't do.
Can't
boys
get pregnant.
Boys can't have babies. But mind you, in saying that, some people would consider that transphobic.
Yeah.
That I say boys can't have babies because now, and I have read about it in some US, they have things like tampons in men's male changing
boys
rooms.
menstruate too.
Yeah.
I mean, so when I was in Sweden last year to talk about gender identity at this feminist conference or gender equality conference or something, and I said, men can't have babies. I mean, this is one of the most obvious differences between men and women is men can have babies or they can't give birth. And this female who identifies as a trans woman stood up and had the last word, unfortunately, so I didn't get to respond. But she stood up and said, "I'm a man and I've given birth." So, and that was disproving my entire argument, and everyone applauded. And
Everyone applauded.
I was like, the reason I didn't get to say that, the reason that you gave birth is because you're a female. You're not a man. You didn't just prove that men can get pregnant and give birth. Men cannot get pregnant and give birth. What you just proved is that you're a female.
So there's a difference between female and male.
Yes.
Compared to man and woman.
No. Well, a man is
Which
an
is
adult.
the gender?
Okay, so
male and female is the biological sex.
Gender is masculinity and femininity. So a man is an adult human male and a woman is an adult human female, and gender is masculinity and femininity. So those ideas around the stereotypes, right? So the nurturing, aggressive, rational, irrational. You like pink, you like dresses. You play with trucks versus dolls. You wear makeup. You have long hair. You wear high heels.
So what about rock stars who have long hair and wear makeup and are
Exactly.
male?
Exactly.
I was just thinking as you were talking about that person who stood up. If gender is a social construct, what is the correct gender term for a female, like a woman, a girl? Because if it's a social construct, and I'm just kind of exploring what you've said about you can't basically change. If it's a social construct and you transition as a social construct, can't you therefore change the terminology and that be acceptable? Or is it because you've been quote unquote male for all your life and that's the social construct you've come under? You know what I'm saying?
Why do you need to change the terminology? Why don't you just be like, I'm a man and I don't ascribe to masculinity?
I don't think that's actually respectfully necessarily a relevant question. Why do you have to? Because you want to? Why do we do anything? Because we want to half the time?
So, yeah, but it doesn't make sense. So do it, then say, again, this comes down to public versus private. So privately, you can be in your brain, I'm a woman, but you don't get to legally say that you're literally female.
So you would be against obviously changing birth certificates and that kind of thing? Mm-hmm. What about in a workplace type setting if, the person who was born Jimmy, who's now Jane, wants to be referred to as Jane, and the workplace says, go fuck yourself.
Well,
We're going to call you Jimmy.
He doesn't get to force everybody else to do what he wants to do. I mean, this is about the compelled speech thing, right? Sure. Probably in a workplace, maybe just to be polite, everyone would be like, sure, we'll start calling him, her, and Jane, just to be nice. But it's different when we're talking about legally, and you have to, otherwise you're guilty of like a hate crime.
Yeah. What about
and I'm not, and everyone shouldn't have to do it, but maybe everyone in the workplace would just go along with it just to be nice.
What about you're obviously got a bit of the Celtic root. I can see it in the hair. You see it in the beard. What about
my tan skin?
Yeah. What about the workplace calls you, hey, you Ginger, and you're like, I don't want to be called Ginger, and they're like, well, fuck you, I'm going to call you Ginger anyway.
Well, I can't make them not. Like I can say, this pisses me off, or I don't like. I mean, I don't.
Should there be some recourse?
No.
So should there be
toughen up, man? Like someone calls me Ginger. Like people say all sorts of shit about me. Like deal with it. Like the world is not going to be nice to you all the time. They're not going to do what you want them to do. Right?
Hey, just secretly, right? No one's going to know this. Do you have a secret Twitter account?
No.
Not even like you haven't even got a fakie out there because you must come up on Twitter a lot.
Yeah, it's really irritating. I can't.
But you haven't even got to
stand it.
I want to be.
Well, because what's the point? Like it's like I wouldn't have any following. Well, I can still see. Like you can still look at Twitter even if you don't have a Twitter account. But like, it would just feel like sad and frustrating because you aren't. Like, what would you be doing?
I don't know.
Trolling?
I use Twitter primarily as a source of receiving information rather than sending information.
I use Twitter as a way to like spread my message. Now I sound like a cult leader, but to engage with people as me.
Yeah.
To respond to libel, to connect with other people. Like it wouldn't be fun for me to have some kind of like anonymous Twitter account that was just. I mean, what would I be doing? Defending myself?
I'm just thinking purely. I mean, I get a lot of news from Twitter. I use it as a source of.
I still look at it. Like I still look, but yeah, I don't have a me secret account.
So I want to go through this. Yeah. What I think we'll do to start with. Actually, Jace has got something to say. Obviously, throw what you got, Jace. What are we talking about?
I was just looking into this because I saw some people talking about it in the comments. That. I have to look at this further to see what the process is, but it looks like I didn't know this, but it looks like in New Zealand you can literally choose your identity, an official identity, so your driver's license can say what you want it to say. And I didn't even realise this must be newish that you can have a X as well, so undetermined, unspecified. So your official identification, including passport, you can choose in New Zealand whether you are male or female, irrespective of what genitals you have. Mm-hmm. Or chromosomes you have.
Mm-hmm. How do you respond when people say, why are you so fascinated with people's genitals? What's your response to that? Because that's a common pushback as well.
What a stupid thing to say. I know. It's like, I'm not. Like, it's like, when am I talking? I'm not talking that much about people's genitals. I talk about male penises in the context of change rooms because I'll say, like, yeah, like, it's inappropriate for a man to be standing around naked with his penis out when there's women and girls around, like, in a change room. But I don't talk. It's not about genitals. And I feel like that speaks more to them and their misunderstanding, whether intentional or unintentional. I think intentional misunderstanding of women's concerns, misrepresentation of women's concerns. It's not like we're going around policing genitals. Like, it's about so much more than that.
Do you know Blair White?
Yeah.
You know of her?
Yeah.
What about her in a changing room? How would you feel about like I know that it's hard to bring it down to an individual thing, but she very much. Can you have a look?
I mean, Blair White's not the kind of person who goes around imposing his trans identity on everyone else. Like, Blair wouldn't be mad if I said you're male because Blair knows that he's male. So he whatever, like, person to person, I would probably call him she.
Just
I don't know.
Open up the far left, bro. So this is Blair White. Blair White's a YouTube personality, very unique unicorn, conservative voice in the transgender community. I say unique because not the norm, and is very clear. Was a big part of the Jessica Yaniv conversation. Refers to herself as her. Presents very much as female. I know for some in the transgender community that's an offensive thing to say because it shouldn't matter how you present.
You're saying that, like, Blair passes.
Yeah, easily.
So, but I mean. Okay, again, like, this isn't the conversation we're having, so I don't like to have this conversation. But really, if somebody actually passes and they're in the washroom,
you're not gonna know.
Then who cares? Because no one's going to know anyway. Like, you're not flaunting your dick. You're not making people feel uncomfortable. Like, then fine. Like,
I wonder as well, this conversation.
Like, also be respectful. Like, the other question is, like, if you're a man and you are using women's spaces and you know that you're making them feel uncomfortable, why are you doing that? Like, have some consideration, have some empathy, be concerned about how other people feel.
I also wonder about this conversation that we in New Zealand don't have the same sort of grasp as North America. I feel like there's a different culture in North America, like in the changing rooms. Like we don't. I've had American friends when I was playing basketball, and the girls as well. They'd go into the changing room after, they'd just strip off and get in the shower, sort of thing. In New Zealand, we don't do that. That's not how people are at the gym or anything. It's more like go into the cubicle, take your gears off, have a shower, get dressed, come out of the cubicle.
Right.
Toilets are all individual, that sort of thing. And I wonder if we don't have quite the same understanding as what happens in America, based on that kind of changing room ethos of just stripping down naked. Everyone's naked in the changing room using the facilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe. And I mean, I find that this conversation is most often in the States, especially reduced to bathrooms and then change rooms as the next step. And what no one ever talks about, or very rarely talks about, is the prison issue. Because, women who are in prison are some of the most marginalized women in the country. Women who are in prison have high rates of assault and abuse in their past. Often they're struggling with drug addiction, mental illness. Often there's poverty. I mean, how do you end up in prison? Like, you come from a marginalized place to begin with, right? So these are already really marginalized women who suffer like an inordinate amount of trauma and then suffer more trauma in the prison system. And they're being forced to share spaces with men. And the kinds of men who are being transferred to female prisons are men who perpetrated sexual assault or really horrific crimes against kids. Because, I mean, that's part of the reason why they want to be transferred. Because in the male prison system, they're going to beat up because they, did something really horrible. And they're perpetrating assault against these women, and these women have no recourse. Like, these are women who have no privacy, no boundaries, no rights at all. Yeah. And then they're being placed in prison with these assholes who are assaulting and harassing them. So
transgender woman going into prison, I'm hypothetically for this conversation saying post-op, being through all the operations, presents as female physically, you would say male prison for that person?
Yeah, but that's not, I mean, those aren't the men who are being transferred into female prisons in Canada in any case, are men who still have
their bits,
all their male parts.
Because the other thing about that transgender woman going to a prison obviously would be a target for all those same rapes and abuses and that kind of stuff there. So
it's just not the conversation that we're having, and it's not what's happening. What's happening is that it's just men who are in prison already and saying, oh, actually, I'm a woman and I want to be transferred.
Do you know what we're doing here, though? What we're doing is we're having that conversation that everyone wants to have with one fucking moron on this side of the microphone and someone with a whole bunch of thoughts on the other side of the microphone. And I guess I'm getting to ask all those questions and have those thoughts out loud that everyone has. Because what you're saying, I believe, is the 2 or 3 examples that are often used as defences, like the is not the broader picture of the legislative things you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think also we as individuals, we often adhere or we go to those anecdotals, or we go to those 1 or 2 stories because, I've got a mate who, or I knew someone who.
Or that's what people think. Like, so when we talk about trans, maybe people are assuming that these people have had all the surgeries, and it's just not the case.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to read you this message. You told me that you've got thick skin and stuff. I've just had a personal message. No, a personal message from a friend who I respect and love to bits. I'm not going to read all of it because it's long, but someone says, I get your direction talking to me and standing up as an ally, but there is no reasoning with the TERFs, and all it does is fuel a fire.
I mean, I'm not
going to mention their name. That's their position.
Whatever.
But I want to see how you respond to that.
I mean, no reasoning. Like, we're talking about people who say that if you disagree with them, they're guilty of a crime or they should be murdered. Like, what people say about people like me is that I'm guilty of hate speech, that I should be beaten up, that I should be killed, that I'm a bigot, that I'm a horrible person.
Seriously, actually should be killed? That's...
Okay, so at our Vancouver, we had an event in Vancouver to talk about media bias and the gender identity debate.
Yep.
And some of the protesters stood outside with a cardboard guillotine with the words TERFs and SWERFs, step right up. I mean,
what's a SWERF? I don't even know what that is.
It's a sex worker exclusionary radical feminist. So I mean, that's not a real thing. There's no feminist that excludes prostituted women.
Right.
I mean, lots of my friends have been prostituted. What my opinion about prostitution
What
in
would
the
a
sex
Smurf
industry
be,
is
out of
shaped.
interest?
A
What
Smurf?
would a Smurf be?
Like, so I mean, essentially it's like feminists who are critical of prostitution are called SWERFs, and it's misrepresentative, just as TERF is misrepresentative, because we're not excluding trans people.
So
anyway, so they were saying we should be killed. They were like, step right up, you guys should be murdered.
For those people who don't know, trans exclusionary radical feminist, TERF.
Yeah.
Would you consider yourself one?
No, of course not. I mean, I don't identify as a radical feminist anyway, but I'm not excluding anyone from anything. I'm excluding men from women's spaces, but I'm not excluding them because they identify as trans, and I'm not excluding, it doesn't matter to me whether or not you identify as trans or not. But yeah, I mean, there's no reasoning with TERFs. It's like, there's no reasoning. Like, it's like, we're just trying to have a conversation. We're saying really pretty like basic stuff. And these are the people who won't engage, trans activists.
Yeah.
Who misrepresent us, who smear us, who refuse to engage in debates, refuse to, come to the conversation.
But there is
like, there's no reasoning with somebody who's going to insist that a male is a woman and yell it over and over and over and over again. And then when you say, what's a woman? Like, if you're insisting that this man is a woman, what does that mean? What does it mean to be a woman? And they say, what? No, fuck you. And like, shut it down. Like, that's unreasonable. Like, explain your position. They won't argue. They say there's no debate. Like,
we put out there a thing today that people could jump on the Facebook page. Have we had any people chatting away there, or
yes,
anything worth mentioning, or is it all filthy, revolting stuff?
Oh no, there is definitely stuff in there. There's people having a go at each other, as you'd expect. As you'd expect. No, there's a few things. One of the earlier comments was, and I reassured this person because they're a friend of the show that I'm sure you would bring it up, was about the eye. I'm sure you know what that means.
Reaching into the eye.
The intersex.
So, I don't know if that's something you want to talk about at some point, but yeah, people are just kind of this one is one of those ones about the YouTube mantra about not reading the comments potentially. But,
okay.
No, there's a lot of hearty debate going on.
Oh, that's fine.
Not read the comments because it's like all mean.
No. There's there's good people on both sides.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Trump.
No, one person has pointed out though, and we probably want to make sure that's clear in the thing that about. Oh, sorry, I completely forgot her name. One we were just using an example, and that she has ties to white nationalists.
Me?
So. No, the one we had on the screen.
Blair White?
Blair White, potentially. I could be misreading the comments. I
Dunno.
apologise, but yeah, we're absolutely not
I wasn't
condoning or talking about white nationalists and those white nationalists.
Well, I wasn't bringing her up.
I
Wasn't bringing her up as an example of someone to adhere to or follow. I just brought it up because I knew she's a attractive-looking transgender woman, and she passes. That was the only reason I brought her up.
People use Blair as an example of that a
Again,
lot.
I could be
It's like,
misreading
well,
the
what
comments,
about this person who looks like a sexy lady?
But the interesting thing about Blair, and I can say this because she vlogs about this, is she hasn't had bottom surgery. And she talks about that openly.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. I mean, for Blair's sake.
Yeah, and because she says...
I didn't know that.
That her...
See, I'm not obsessed with genitals. I don't know. I have no idea.
Her body dysmorphia, I get these things so wrong, whatever it is. Gender dysphoria, body dysmorphia, whatever it is, mostly kicks in when people don't see her as female. So her changes was for her appearance. Mm-hmm. So she presented as female, which means actually bottom surgery didn't matter to her. Now, for other people,
right.
it's essential and it does matter. And I think what we should touch on here, Jason, we will, is in this whole conversation, intersex people, where do they fit?
They don't. It's not part of the conversation. I mean, we're not talking about intersex people. I mean, the thing about intersex is that most people who are intersex are still obviously male or female and then have an intersex condition. I think there's some people who are intersex where it really is difficult to tell and they're both.
Yeah.
But intersex conditions are actually pretty like wide ranging.
Right.
And when we're talking about trans people aren't intersex, right? Like they don't have an intersex condition. They're just obviously male or female people who want to identify as the opposite sex. So it sort of is like...
So you do keep saying want to. So your position is it's an absolute choice. It's not like being gay from birth. Your position for a transgender is they're making a conscious choice and there's nothing else to it?
Well, I think that it's different for different people. So I think that there's some people who are trans who really feel like there's something wrong with their body, that their body's wrong and that they aren't going to feel comfortable with their body until they change it.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of other people who maybe don't identify with the gender stereotypes. There's some men who have fetishes, like autogynephilia, it's called. So they are turned on by the idea of themselves as women in women's clothes, being seen as a woman, whatever. And there's some people who probably have like some form of mental illness, body dysmorphia, whatever you want to call it. But I think for a lot of people, it's a desire. And of course, now it's a trend. Now it's like trendy it's like, teenagers want to feel special. So it's another way to feel special. Like, I'm non-binary, I'm trans. Like, it's cool.
There is certainly it's like, it depends what happens. You look at the like the rates of violence, the reported rates of violence going up in society, and we go, are the rates of violence going up, or are we now have a society where we report them more?
Right.
And so with the whole gender conversation amongst schools especially, you see people going like 20% of the school is now identifying as gender fluid. Is it that actually they've always been there and now people are just comfortable to acknowledge it, or is it a trend and it feels cool to be part of the group or whatever, or is it a bit of both?
It's obviously a trend. And if you talk to de-sisters, so young women who transitioned and then went back, basically,
and those numbers are going up as well.
And they're really speaking out a lot, and they'll tell you, I did this because I felt like there's something wrong, and then I started reading about this on the internet, or was pressured, or was told at school, maybe I'm trans. And it's like, oh, okay, maybe I'm trans. Maybe this will solve all my problems if I like transition. Maybe I feel weird because I'm actually supposed to be a man, so I should go on hormones and start wearing binders.
I can't imagine being told that by someone. I mean, if you came to that conclusion, that's one thing. But being told
how would a kid come to that conclusion? Like, what kid is going to invent the idea of trans? Like, where would that idea come from? That's an adult idea, born in the wrong body. What kid is going to tell you? I mean, kids might say all sorts of things like, I'm a cat, I'm an elephant. My ex-boyfriend told me that when he was a kid, he really wanted to be an elephant when he grew up, and that was like, he's like, I'm going to be an elephant when I grow up.
So did he achieve the goal?
No, he didn't. Cute though, right?
Yeah. I wanted to be a talkback host when I grew up, for quite a funny reason. I remember listening to talkback, which I got to do for 10 years. I remember listening to talkback. This is, Jason, you'll laugh at this because this completely shows my personality. I wanted to be a talkback host because there was a woman on News Talk ZB who used to work like 10 a.m. till midday. And as like a 10-year-old, I used to think, 2 hours work a day, that'd be good.
I can totally relate to that.
That was the only reason. And it's not 2 hours work a day. It's a fucking bit more than that.
Yeah. The great thing about my job is that I can sleep in until noon and work till 2 or 3 a.m. So
I've got a bunch of thoughts, right?
Okay.
First one is, do you think that on some level are you okay with the idea of being classified as a second wave feminist? Does that sit okay with you?
No, so my analysis is rooted in second wave feminism and radical feminism, but I don't identify as a radical feminist or a second wave. To be honest, I don't want to identify as anything. I don't like the labels anymore. Like, I would rather talk about ideas and ideologies and arguments and legislation or whatever. But my understanding of feminism and women's rights, I learned from second wave feminists and radical feminists.
Do you think that one of the situations here is, I'm going to just use this idea of adhering to second wave feminism, right? That you are standing up and advocating this area of society, second wave feminism, the rights to it, and other people are adhering to and trying to advance the rights of transgender people, and they're at conflict. But it's a little bit like if you were working hard for breast cancer, the people who are working on prostate cancer are actually completely separate, but it's not like they go, fuck you, breast cancer doesn't matter, it's only about prostate cancer. And you guys don't go, no, this is do you know what I mean? It's like you're actually advocating for different groups.
Mm-hmm.
And is there a way to do that without shitting on prostate cancer, so to speak, or vice versa? Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I sort of think that it's impossible for feminism and trans activism to be compatible, because what trans activism is saying goes against everything that feminism has always advocated for.
Right.
So, you know, we can't even have women's rights if there's no such thing as a woman, or if there's no cohesive definition as a woman. If a woman is nothing. So another thing that I'll ask besides you know, what's trans? What does transgender mean? Define that in a coherent, clear way. Is what is a woman? Like, how are you defining woman? And, you know, trans activists won't answer. And I just want to be clear that when I'm saying trans activists, I'm not necessarily talking about trans identified people. I'm talking about people who advocate this ideology, this gender identity ideology. But yeah, I mean, why do women need rights in the first place if they're not oppressed or discriminated against just because they're female? Are they discriminated against because they adhere to femininity, because they wear a dress, because they wear makeup, because they have long hair? Or is it because they were born female and therefore they're treated differently in society?
Or a combination of the both, all of the above. The other thing I was thinking was I had a conversation with someone who definitely considers themselves a third wave feminism, intersectional feminist, a wee while ago. And I just kind of wanted to publicly say that it's a little bit like the Martina Navratilova situation, where she came out and she said trans athletes are cheats. And then she walked back that comment to say they're not cheats, but she still didn't, but it's not fair. But she still said it's not fair. And then she was cast out of the LGBT group, no matter all the work she's done for that since the 60s, 70s, 80s, you know, one of the highest profile, probably most important figures in that group for a period of time. People like Germaine Greer, who I've mentioned tonight amongst second wave feminists, was talking to this person who had a different perspective, didn't really think that highly of Germaine Greer today. And I just had the thought, and I never had this conversation with them, and hopefully I will one day, is how much does a third wave feminist or an intersectional feminist today owe what they're doing to people like Germaine Greer? And I was just reminded of that saying, if I see further, it's because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. And people like Germaine Greer are giants. And I'm speaking from the outside, but from looking in, are giants in the world of, you know, advancing feminist values and feminism and stuff. And just to be kind of shat on now and be told by a lot of woke individuals that they are completely wrong, there's just something that feels wrong about that to me. Now, I'm not part of the group. I am excluded from that group, but I don't know, it just seems to, you might go, I disagree with some of their policies, they're a bit 20 years ago, but I acknowledge what they've done. But just to basically go, nah, they're not right.
And they're not even, I mean, third wave feminism, I think, is a backlash. I don't think that it is another iteration of feminism. I think that it's a backlash against feminism. And
against, that would have been counterproductive to feminism.
Right. I mean, the ideology is in opposition to everything that second wave and first wave feminists fought for and said. Can you
give us an example?
So, okay. They advocate for prostitution as empowering for women. They say that, you know, pornography can be feminist. They say that self-objectification is a choice, and any choice that a woman makes is potentially a feminist act and empowering, and we can't challenge it. Second wave or radical feminism would say that there's context surrounding a choice to self-objectify, and that's, you know, because women are taught that their primary value is their fuckability, or their ability to be viewed as attractive to men.
So does that mean, for example, I'm sorry, I'm going to use a specific example that might not work here, but things like the slut walk, you wouldn't be a fan of that sort of thing then?
Definitely not.
Because I look at the slut, that sounds so
It's
bad.
like a bunch of young women out in their lingerie and they're sending what message?
But
like,
doing exactly
fuck you, here's my tits. Like,
but doing exactly what all the boys want them to do.
Exactly.
I'd love to see. The boys are on the sideline, you know, watching
they're like,
the titties.
Oh, I do like feminism after all.
Yeah.
It's supporting everything that patriarchy supports, but reframing it as feminism because it's a choice.
Well, but where's the line then of owning one's body and doing
own your body, but you don't, like, every choice you make isn't a feminist choice just because you make the choice. Right? Like, you can choose to do whatever you want. I mean, I say this all the time, but it's like, I wear makeup. Like, I don't, obviously I want to be viewed as attractive, but I'm not going to claim that's feminism because I chose it. Like, my eyeliner isn't feminism or a feminist choice. I know why I do it. I don't even really feel like I need to defend it. Like, I don't understand why everything that we do all the time has to be feminist. And I think that third wave feminism is super individualistic and lacking in historical and social context.
That's a really interesting point you're making, and I'm thinking about it from many other aspects in life. Not everything we need to do needs to be feminist. Some things are just things. There was that. It was actually it was a fake news.
You're fake news.
It was a fake news story.
Oh, it came in handy after all.
There was a fake news story about a poppy that was a rainbow poppy that some kids were wearing at a school, and the school said, if you don't wear it, we're going to ban it. It wasn't a real story. It was fake. But one of the comments that came out of that story was, not everything has to be about gender. Mm-hmm. Like, they were saying it as to advocate, like, this is the time with the poppy, and I'm sure it's the same as part of the Commonwealth, that this is about remembering, those who have fought and died for us and for our freedoms, as they say. And it's okay to actually put the other causes to the side for the day. It doesn't always have to be about that. It doesn't always have to be about feminism. It doesn't always have to be about, national pride. It doesn't always have... Sometimes things are just things.
Yeah.
And they don't have to have another layer on top of them.
Everything isn't political, and it's like, like, if I identify as a feminist, that means that everything that I do in my life is feminist. I mean, ridiculous. Like, of course, everything I do in my life isn't feminist. I do unfeminist things all the time. I'm just a regular human being. And I don't want my whole life to be political. I don't want to pretend like I'm a perfect person. I'm not a perfect person. Like, of course I care about my appearance. Of course, like, I'm superficial. Of course, like, I watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Like, I want to live my life. Like, I want to be me. Like, and I also,
just lost a lot of respect for you, by the way. It's just Keeping Up with the Kardashians.
I cannot fucking help it. Like, actually, my favorite show is Vanderpump Rules. So I just want to, shout them out. But, I watch shitty TV. Part of the reason that I watch shitty TV is because...
Did you watch it as a feminist, though? Is that what you do?
No, of course not. I watch it because I'm working all day and I'm focused on these, like, kind of intense things, and I want to check out.
We've been going for 2 hours. I'm actually, and we haven't actually touched on Twitter yet. I actually do want to kind of cover off what happened, because I think it's a really interesting snapshot in society today to sort of woke culture. And you were a topic of conversation on Joe Rogan. So they had on Jack Dorsey. Jack Dorsey's his name?
Yeah.
And one of his top kind of standards person.
His like safety person or whatever.
And have we got that clip, Jace? Because we actually pulled a little bit of it out and we thought we'd do it because I just wanted to get your take on it. And I also wanted to know the tweet that you sent, men aren't, was it men aren't women though, or men aren't women?
So I was suspended for men aren't women though. Right. And then I was permanently banned for referring to Yaniv, JY, as he. I didn't even say anything mean about him. I just said he, and he was going by Jonathan Yaniv and didn't have like female pronouns on his social media at the time. I said, yeah, it's him.
Right.
Because somebody had outed him or whatever.
Let's give this, a minute or so and just see what they were talking about, because they were talking about the process.
I don't want to harass them. I'll call anybody whatever they want. I mean, if you want to change your name to a woman's name and identify as a woman, I'm 100% cool with that.
So that frustrates you.
Mm-hmm.
By saying I don't think that you should be able to compete as a woman, this opens me up for harassment. Now, I never reported any of it. I just don't pay attention to it.
But in going into like Meghan Murphy, for instance, right? You can call that targeted harassment if Meghan Murphy, who is, for those that don't know, she's a radical feminist who refuses to... He says you're a radical feminist?
It's fine. Whatever.
If she's in an argument with a trans person over whether or not they should be allowed in sports or in biologically female spaces, and she refuses to use their pronoun because of her ideology, you'll ban them.
Again, it depends on the context on the platform, and it's also
a great jacket,
not banned permanently. Like, you get warnings.
Well, she's banned
such
permanently,
a liar.
but let's
she
be
was
clear
warned,
about what happened.
But she was warned
explain, because you explained
times.
it to me. What did she actually do?
Warned for
my
what?
understanding, and I don't have the tweet by tweet the way that I did for the others, but my understanding is that she was warned multiple times for misgendering an individual that she was in an argument with, and this individual is
false?
actually bringing a lawsuit against her.
I wasn't fucking warned for anything. Like that wasn't a rule. Like misgendering was not a rule when I was banned. Sorry.
Only one side of the ideology, and you've banned only one of those people.
Yeah. Okay, that'll do for us.
Sorry,
so
I talked over her while she was talking,
fine.
but it makes me mad because she's like, "You were warned," and it's like, I appealed these suspensions and I appealed being banned, and they never even explained what rule I broke. They just said hateful conduct, and it's like, what?
The gentleman in the red headphones was Tim Paul. He's a journalist, and the point he was making, because Jack Dorsey's saying we're not a left wing progressive company, and the point he was making was, well, you're taking a position here based on a left wing progressive ideology. In other words, this person says men can be women. This person says men can't be women. As soon as you side with men can be women, you're taking a partisan position. Mm-hmm. It's not an open. So that's the point he was trying to make. So you just said something interesting. I want to pick up on when you were banned. Misgendering wasn't a bannable offence.
No, I mean, there's a lawsuit.
Was that a retrospective ban?
Yeah, so they created a rule and then went through my tweets and then banned me. I mean, and again, like, Twitter has never communicated to me what rule I broke. I'm guessing. I'm assuming it's misgendering because I was banned for saying, yeah, it's him.
But when you said it, it wasn't a rule.
No, it wasn't a rule. And the first report that it was a rule came about an hour after I was banned, which I find like pretty weird.
So that rule should be known as the Meghan Murphy rule, because obviously they put it in place for you.
Yeah, Meghan Murphy's law.
Well, okay, that's so.
I mean, it's like they have to inform their users if, as per their own rules, they have to inform users if they're changing the rules, and they did not.
And surely it's completely unfair for them to retrospectively apply those rules.
Yes. Like, it's like, at least tell me, at least say, from now on, just so you know, if you refer to a man as she and he doesn't like it, we're going to ban you.
Yeah. But
I didn't, hateful, harassing, like, give me a break.
The conversation you were having with Jessica Yaniv or about Jessica Yaniv?
And it wasn't a conversation. It was literally, so there was one tweet and it said, and I posted a blog post that someone else had written, outing him, because at the time he was being referred to as JY.
Yeah.
There was a publication ban. So somebody figured out his identity, or at least his Twitter handle, and figured out that he had been predating on young girls, and that this kind of extortion, this going after businesses and saying, like, I ordered a pizza and it was messed up when it got to my door, so now you owe me free pizza for life. Like, this is kind of his MO. This is how he got money.
So the publicized case was, he presents as Jessica Yaniv, transgender woman. I want a bikini wax. I still have a penis and testicles. If you don't wax my penis and testicles, you are discriminating against me based on gender.
Yeah.
And he did that,
identity.
I think, in 16, I call them esthetologists.
Estheticians.
Estheticians.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the fight she was fighting at that moment, be it right or wrong. That's what they were doing.
Yeah, and I mean, essentially he was just trying to get money out of people, which I said initially, and which was determined through this BC Human Rights Tribunal process. He doesn't actually believe that he's female. He just saw this as an opportunity, and he did get some money out of some of the estheticians, like some of them that, just got freaked out and were like, oh, like, you're going to take me to court.
Here's $1,000. Leave me alone.
Yeah. And so somebody basically outed him, and I tweeted the post and said, is it true that JY is actually Trusted Nerd? That was his Twitter handle. I found or was sent a screenshot of one of his online reviews, like a Yelp review or something like that, saying, like, so-and-so did a great job on my bikini wax, with his photo there, with his name there, Jonathan Yaniv, with his male face. And so I posted that and said, yeah, it's him, as confirmation to myself. And then I was banned just for that tweet. That's what they sent me. That was their one reason for permanently banning me from Twitter. And Yaniv, publicly bragged, it's on video, at New West, which is a suburb of Vancouver, in their city council meeting or something saying, I personally got Meghan banned from Twitter. So he saw that, contacted Twitter, and got me banned.
Didn't Jessica Yaniv also tweet some horrific stuff back at you or something, and that was all ignored?
No, that was Lindsay Shepherd.
Oh, Lindsay Shepherd, okay.
But he got Lindsay Shepherd banned, and then they let her come back. But yeah, he was super grossly insulting to her. He said disgusting things about her, and she got banned, and they brought her back just because it was like there was a bunch of controversy and people got pissed off, and they were like, fine.
So he was taking, JY was taking a group of these salons to court, to the
individuals. Like, there were women who worked out of their homes. They were mostly immigrant women. Like, English was a second language. Like, they're pretty vulnerable, marginalized women.
And it's the Human Rights Tribunal, which obviously, again, Commonwealth, we have the same thing here. But apparently, is it the British Columbia is pretty left progressive?
Yeah.
But
super biased.
Super biased. But even then, when they got through it all, basically said, this is bullshit. To Jessica's claims, they were all dismissed.
Yeah. I mean, and yeah, the tribunal is like throughout this whole process, Devin Cousineau, is that how you say her last name? She was using female pronouns. Like, she would, acknowledge like he has a penis and he's asking women to touch his penis and balls, but saying she.
All right.
I'm saying he, sorry.
So,
but, she's going along with the ideology in this tribunal, and people are sort of forced to also use the pronouns in this tribunal process. Like, and she has an obvious bias in terms of this specific issue. So I kind of feel like it's ridiculous that she was the one to determine the outcome, but she made the right choice anyway.
Because of that case, because of the Jessica Yaniv case, and because that's what you were talking about, is there any recourse for you to come back on Twitter and go, nah, see, I was right?
There should be. And a whole bunch of people on Twitter said that. Like, when he lost, when they ruled against him, a whole bunch of people were like, okay, so now you're going to bring Meghan back, right? Because now you're acknowledging that he's male and that this was all bullshit and that it wasn't harassment for her to refer to him as he. Like, you're basically in this trial acknowledging that he's male. Yeah, so that these female estheticians shouldn't have to touch his genitals because he has male genitals, and it's not the same as giving a woman a Brazilian bikini wax.
Just for clarity, the Human Rights Tribunal actually ruled towards Jessica Yaniv being male or having male body parts. Did they use the term male?
I think so, yeah. I mean, essentially what they ruled is that he's trying to extort money out of people, that he was taking advantage of this ideology to try to get money out of people, and that he wasn't like legitimately being discriminated against, and that these women have the right to say, no, I'm not going to wax your balls. Like, you have male body parts.
But if it was a biologically born female, they probably wouldn't have the right to say no. So that lends it towards them identifying JY as not.
Yeah, I mean, it was an acknowledgement that he's male.
So therefore, you should be back on Twitter.
Exactly.
How many followers did you have?
Like 25,000.
So for an independent freelance journalist, that's significant.
It continues to have a big impact. I mean, people are like, oh, it's social media, who cares? But it's like, this is my whole job. Like, I don't work for a company. Like, I don't have all I have is me and my platform and my ability to communicate with my audience and share my work. I mean, Twitter and social media shares, and Twitter is the primary way that you share nowadays. Like, that's why you get hired. Like, people ask me to write things because I have a big public profile.
Right.
Like, I mean, I think that I'm a good writer also, but that's like, if you're a nobody, it's unfortunate. Like, I'm not saying this is a good system, but it's true. Nowadays, publications depend on shares.
Yeah.
They depend on clicks. And if you can't get those clicks, then they're not going to pay you to write for them.
What were you known for before the girl kicked off Twitter? Like, you already had those 25,000 followers.
I mean, because I was one of the only people talking about this, I think, as a feminist. And I had a big profile. Now, I don't want to say I'm one of the only people, because women have been pushing on this issue for a while. But I was probably like the highest profile woman/feminist who was pushing back on this, and who was refusing to go along with the pronoun thing, and challenging the ideology. I went to the Senate to speak against Bill C-16. I think I was probably the only person in Canada to publish an op-ed criticizing Bill C-16 from a feminist perspective.
Right.
There was Jordan Peterson and there was me who spoke out against this bill publicly in the media.
One of the people who has said to me, advised me sort of not to have this conversation, was saying that there's always money. You know, they're like being an opponent of this, like Jordan Peterson has made stacks of cash off this, but pointing towards the reason he's doing this is to make stacks of cash. Financially for you, has this helped you, harmed you? Where has it left you?
I mean, it's not lucrative. Like, I don't know where these people think that I'm getting money from. Like, my entire income is freelance or donations. I'm definitely not making Jordan Peterson money. I'm still living in my like shitty, cheap apartment in Vancouver. It's not benefited me in any way. Like, I've lost friends, which is really hard and painful. That's probably the worst thing about this whole thing. It's
Right.
like, I'm scared of being beat up in public, obviously.
So you're recognized in Vancouver? People know who you are?
Yeah. And I mean, and I've also lived in Vancouver my whole life.
Right.
So, and Vancouver is a small city, and so people know who I am, and it's awkward. Like, it's awkward with my friends who stuck by me because they get harassed by other people who pressure them to not be friends with me. There's like bars that I don't feel comfortable going to anymore.
Right, wow.
There's areas that I don't feel comfortable going. I've totally lost friends. Like, people have bailed on me because they're like, this is just too like controversial. Like, they don't even have any fucking opinion on this, right? They're just like, this is
There's too much drama around you.
Yeah. And yeah, pressure from their mutual friends. But yeah, I mean, this is not, I don't have any like job security or financial security. Like, I'm making a living and I like my life, you know, like I don't want to just be like, oh, this is so shitty. Like, I do feel lucky to have a platform. Like, I'm a writer. That's what I do. I love writing, and I'm really, really grateful actually that I can make a career from writing. I'm really grateful that I get to travel places. Yeah. But it's not, you know, like, I'm not making thousands of dollars off this. Like, I'm breaking even. I'm doing okay. Like, my life is okay, but like, I'm not getting rich off this shit. Like,
I wonder, to wrap this mofo up, I was talking to an academic a few weeks ago, James Flynn. He's known worldwide as the Flynn effect. Talks about how our IQs are growing each generation. So on average, our IQ is higher than our parents, and on average, their IQ is higher than their parents. It's called the Flynn effect. He's an Otago University emeritus professor. Okay. And what I found with Jim, and if he's watching, love him to bits, and he's coming back when he does his book, is he spoke in a very academic way, and it can come across as harsh. Not that he's being harsh. Like, a lot of his study is in America, and he refers to the blacks. Not because he's demeaning them, but it's almost like he talks as if
it's like a trigger term. Like, people are like,
but like, it's like he's literally reading the title at the top of the column on the spreadsheet. This is the black community. This is the white community. This is the Hispanic community. Do you think that there's any danger that you've been doing this for so long, and that you're so assured in your position that transgender people, so we're not talking about the activists, but it's transgender people, feel kind of, I don't know, thrown under the bus or scared, or that the position you're putting out there is, because I mean, I would know without asking that you wouldn't wish any harm to anyone. You're not going to have your own guillotine outside there.
No, God, I would never. I've never threatened anybody. I'm not trying to shut anybody down. I've never tried to stop an event from happening or a person from talking. No.
I don't like these kinds of questions. I almost made myself sick the other day asking one of these questions in a podcast, because I don't like doing sort of interviewee Q&As. But I'm prompted to this question. If we were going to finish this podcast with you saying something to the transgender community, what would you say?
I mean, this is not going to be the answer that you want, but I don't think that the transgender community is a monolith. Like, I don't think that all people who identify as trans agree with trans activism or gender identity ideology. I think there's a lot of people who identify as trans or transsexual or whatever who really are just trying to live their lives and don't want this to be a political thing, and aren't trying to access women's spaces, and just really just want to be okay in their lives. And then there's this very loud minority who are advocating this like sexist anti-woman ideology and pushing this legislation. And pushing for men to have access to female spaces. Like, I'm not talking shit about trans people. It's not about trans people. I'm not anti-trans people. I'm defending women's rights, and I'm defending material reality, and I'm defending rational debate, and I'm defending free speech.
Do you think there's any danger? You've just said, the vocal minority, that the equal and opposite is true. There's a vocal minority in your position, the Jordan Petersons, the yourselves of this world, and actually most of society fitting somewhere between those two.
Nah, I mean, everyone knows what a man is and what a woman is. I mean, most people agree with me, and most people tell me privately. Like, it's like, what's interesting about the threats that I get is that they're all public, so they're advertised. And the emails that I get and the private conversations I have with basically 99% of people, they all agree with my position, and they're like, "Oh, we really support you. We're not going to say anything out loud, but you're right." And I mean, most people are not engaged with this debate. Like, most people in most countries have better things to do than to have these weird academic debates about gender. Like, like, most people understand what a male is and what a female is, and most people know that it's not possible to change sex.
On that note, Jace, is there anything to wrap up, or should we head off to the wild blue yonder? Anything you want to share from the Facebook page or anything, or are they still don't read the Facebook page comments?
Yeah, it's there's lively debate.
Okay.
There's lively debate going on, and that's the point of this podcast, isn't it?
Oh, look, I think the genuine...
We aren't here to take sides. We're here to have a conversation. That's what we're about.
Well, no, I mean, I think I'm here to at times to take sides, but this one for me is certainly, and I said this to you in the car on the way out, and I have said this before, I'm someone who's been involved around the LGBT community for 20 years, been an ally in the community for 20 years. If I'm sitting here going, what the fuck is happening in society today, from someone who's not an expert but has been sort of involved in the community a lot, I think that means 95% of your average Joe out there is even more confused. And I think that's why it's important to have these conversations. And even though I was told that, think about the people who are listening, think about how this might be damaging to people listening and that kind of thing. I'm more about, I said to someone the other day, the best disinfectant is sunlight. Not that it has to be disinfectantized. There's nothing wrong with it.
No, but
to bring it out there.
I don't want to interrupt, but it's like, what's damaging about what I'm saying? Like, I'm not saying anything that hurts people. I'm not advocating to hurt people. And most people listening are not trans activists. Or maybe I assume that the majority of your audience, but certainly the majority of the people in the world are not trans activists. Like, it's like, think about the harm that you're causing. Like, think about women. Like, I'm so annoyed that we don't talk about women and girls, and it's like, you're harming trans people, and it's like, you're like 0.01% of the population who is identifying as trans, and women are 50% of the population. This has a massive impact on all women everywhere.
Do you on that though, do you ever think about, and are you concerned about the fact that your position and opinions, just like that of somebody, say, like Jordan Peterson, a percentage of what he says resonates with those hardcore extremists, and so therefore by agreeing and like by having like the Venn diagram of opinion, having a part of your opinion overlap with a part of their opinion makes their cause stronger for vile, hateful spew that ends up on the internet. Are you concerned
do you
about
think
that
that any man who would like go and beat up a trans woman is listening to me and being like, wow, yeah, like Megan's right, I'm gonna go beat someone up? Like, that's on my audience.
I think that point is, and it's something that I've thought about for me, like what I'm sharing for my thing, is that you met with, we kind of talked about it in the car on the way out, and you said you've traditionally been sort of more of a left voter than a right voter, but the person you met with was our far right politician. He was the one that was champion in what's his name, Seymour, in Parliament. He was the one championing your cause. Jim Jeffries, when he interviewed Jordan Peterson, made the point that a lot of the tiki torch carrying fraternity seem to like to use Peterson's thoughts, and I think that's right. Even James Flynn, who was a member of our Alliance Party, this emeritus professor, the Alliance Party is further left than the Greens, far left. I said to him, does it ever concern you that your work on IQ gets used by the far right as quote unquote evidence for why they're superior to these races with lesser IQs? And he says, absolutely. Is that something you ever think of? That I think it's unquestionable that this conversation, my position of trans athletes not competing in sports is grasped, adhered to, and used by a part of the political spectrum that I don't want to be associated with.
I don't care who I'm associated with. Like, I'm me, and I do not, okay, so I should start by saying that I come from a place of like one of those leftists who only engaged with other leftists, who didn't want anything to do with not only right-wing people, but liberal people, libertarian people, anyone who wasn't in my socialist camp my entire life. I always voted. I voted in every single, as I told you earlier, provincial and federal election for the NDP, which is Canada's Labour Party. And I didn't ever engage with anyone who didn't agree with me on all this stuff, and I vilified them, and I wrote them off, and I ignored them. So I don't, and I no longer, I don't really want anything to do with the left, because I think that they're liars, and I think that they're pathetic, and I think that they're cowards, and I think they stand for fucking nothing, and I think they're, people who are essentially middle-class academics, and they've stopped talking about working class people and poverty and money. But I'm going to be me, and I'm going to say what I want to say. And if right-wing people like it, or conservative people like it, or libertarian people like it, or men's rights activists like it, then fine. Like, that doesn't have anything to do with me. And I'm not against those people just because they don't agree with me. Like, some of them might be assholes, but there's a lot of people on the left who are assholes too. Like, I'm interested in engaging with people and ideas. And there's, I feel really lucky, actually, that all this happened to me, that I got banned from Twitter, and that I've become so controversial over this issue, because it's exposed me to all sorts of people and views that I wasn't exposed to before. And it really humanized those people. Like, so I've talked to conservative people, and I've talked to men who think they hate feminism, and I talked to libertarians and people across the political spectrum, and they're really nice, good people. And maybe we agree on some things, and then we disagree on other things around the economy or around abortion or whatever, but at least we're having those conversations. Like, what I'll give the right credit for, the world is not black and white. We're not all left and right. That's not how things work. But what I will give right-wing people credit for is that I think they're actually more honest than the left. They're not pretending to be perfect. And they'll talk to me, and they'll have conversations with me, like a feminist and a leftist, and they're willing to engage in these debates, and they're respectful. We can disagree about, again, abortion or universal health care or social housing or welfare, and still be fine. And the left will not fucking do that. Like, if you disagree with them, you're out, and you're bad. You're an enemy. You're maybe you should go to jail. Like, I've seen people say like that I should go to jail for what I say, like, on the left.
That's part of the concern about taken to its extreme Bill C-16. It's like, it talks about not there being jail time, but then the point was made in one interview I heard was, so what if I get fined and I don't pay the fine? So so that's actually the pay of jail could be under that law.
And advocating violence, and if they're not advocating violence, they're not opposing it. Like, these leftists are not saying, you know what, it's not okay for you to show up at a protest against Meghan Murphy or against her event with a guillotine. Like, it's not okay for you to threaten violence against these women who are just trying to have a conversation about women's rights and the implications of legislation. Like, this is a law. We're talking about policies and laws that affect people. We should be allowed to have the conversation. All of our events are respectful. All of our events are peaceful. There's nothing offensive going on, and they're threatening to punch us, and in some cases doing it. Like, that's happened. That happened in the UK when they tried to have a meeting about gender identity. Like, a 6-year-old woman got punched by a dude who identifies as a woman.
Do you think you're effective? Do you think the message you're putting out there is resonating?
Yeah, we forced this conversation to happen in Canada. Me and these other women that I know who are just regular women who care about this conversation. They're not necessarily activists. They're certainly not privileged people. It's not like we have money. It's not like we have political power. We've been organizing these events, and the Canadian media was ignoring feminist concerns, women's concerns. They were ignoring that there was a debate to begin at all to begin with. And the conversation is finally happening, and people are stepping up and saying, yeah, this does matter. Or, even if they don't agree with us, they're saying, yeah, these women have the right to talk. I want to talk about this. I want to think about this.
All right. 2.5 hours. or 2.5 hours, or that
Not
much
that
whiskey.
much, see?
Yeah, it wasn't that bad.
I did okay.
Not too bad.
Just in case anyone thinks that I'm wasted. I mean, I am a little bit drunk, but not that drunk. It's not like I finished.
Hey, look,
half the bottle.
whether people agree that this conversation should happen or not, whether they enjoyed it or didn't, whether I've just had a whole bunch of Facebook people unfollow me or not, whether this gets taken down from Facebook or YouTube or not, I still want to say thanks for coming down. You didn't need to do this. I've found it informative. And yeah, it's something that I'm still going to struggle with is the wrong word because I have a lot going on in my life, but still, there's still a lot of processing for me to do to try and figure this out. And I think I could kind of go, who cares? Let's just not worry about that. But I think I'm the kind of person that likes to have a thought and likes to figure stuff out and likes to see what, which way the wind blows, so to speak. So this has been great. I've really enjoyed this. And even though it sounds like Facebook hasn't enjoyed us talking about this so much, that I've enjoyed it. And I'm grateful you gave us a bit of time to come down. It's been a blast.
Oh yeah, I really am so happy to be here. I'm really enjoying myself.
And
I really enjoy having conversations with anyone and everybody. And I wish more people would do it. And so yeah, thanks for bringing me.
Your website is
feministcurrent.com.
People want to find out more about feministcurrent.com. And other than that, get to enjoy Dunedin for 18 hours or something. Hopefully that rain will clear up. It was beautiful this morning, I do promise.
That's okay.
And I don't know.
I'm just going to go to a bar anyway. So
until next time, thanks for coming in, Megan Murphy.
Thank you.